Chapter 18. 6 pairs of eyes in the great hall swept towards her at the same time. This was especially so for little Wang, who revealed an expression of disbelief. His little hand swooped out of her grasp. The word liar was clearly written in his pair of watery eyes. Hey, hey, hey. This little wimp is a little too much. She had already told him that she was in Jade Forest Mountain. He was the one who did not think of it. You can't blame the customer for not being familiar with the business. Greetings to Senior Martial Aunt. Greetings to Ancestral Martial Aunt. Although Zi Yuan and Zhao Yuanxiu were a little unwilling, in the end, the other party's seniority was higher than theirs, so they still had to greet her. Zhu Yao waved her hands and had him stand up, smiling a little awkwardly. She reflexively wanted to grab onto Wang Shuji's little hand, however, he nimbly dodged it. His little face puffed up in anger, as he stared at her with wide eyes that said, "You lied to me. This little wimp, what's he throwing a tantrum for now? Yuanchen, Shuji, the two of you can leave first." Zmo timely came to the rescue, and had Yuanchen bring little Wang, who was still silently glaring at her, down. Walking a few steps closer, he smiled amiably, yet, with his back facing the other two, he gave her a meaningful look. Little Martial Aunt just happened to be at the scene earlier, so you have the most say in this matter. I wonder, how do you think we should deal with this matter? Zhu Yao trembled. Like hell she knew. Was it really a good idea to kick this ball to her? Ho ho. My master is calling me home for dinner. Just when she was about to run, the door behind her creaked shut. Zhu Yao fiercely glared at old man Zmo. You old fox, you're actually kicking a matter like this that clearly offends people to me. Zmo, however, smiled even more amiably, looking as though he was listening to his martial aunt's teachings. Zhu Yao let out a long sigh. She had no choice but to bite the bullet. Squatting down in front of little Xiao Yi, she looked at the child whose entire body was still bleeding, and could not help but frown. Release him first. He was just a child after all. Although Zhao Yuanxiu was a little dissatisfied, he still waved his hand and removed the binding art on Xiao Yi. Xiao Yao heaved a sigh of relief, yet, he still sat on the ground, looking at the crowd with a guarded expression. The conflict between Xiao Yi and Little Fatty, she already had some understanding of it when she received her identity jade tablet back then. This was initially just a quarrel between two children, yet, it had escalated to the point where a life almost happened. Was it because he was a cultivator? As the saying goes, with great power comes great responsibility. This place was good. The stronger one was, the more temperamental one's temper would be. Everyone would attack when the time came. Xiao Yi, why did you kill little fatty Zhao? That's right, he killed him. If the sect master had not appeared back then, little fatty would most probably have really died. Xiao Yi's expression turned cold, and he still insisted. He deserves to be killed. Why? Zhu Yao continued asking. He gritted his teeth, as if remembering something that he hated. Ever since we entered the sect, he has always been bullying Linglong. Linglong didn't bother with him, but he made things worse by pushing Linglong into the cold pond. Because of that, Linglong fell seriously ill and was on the verge of death. Little fatty Zhao even snatched away her life-saving medicine. I've told the senior brother in charge about it, but... He harumphed coldly and looked at Zhao Yuanxiu, who was not too far away. Because little fatty Zhao is the son of the eldest disciple of Weapon Peak, they turned a blind eye to this matter. Zhu Yao pondered for a moment. That Linglong should be the little girl who was with him that day. You want to kill little fatty Zhao just because of this? Xiao Yi nodded, killing intent was still faintly surfacing in his eyes. But have you ever thought that even if you kill little fatty Zhao, you won't be able to save Linglong? And, because of this, you will have to bear a life. Xiao Yi was silent for a moment, and then continued. Even if that's the case, I have still avenged her. So you feel that killing little fatty Zhao is the right thing to do? He continued to nod. Xu Yao was a little powerless. She could not understand why a 10-year-old child would have such an extreme thought. He would treat the matter of killing as a matter of course, and even think that destroying indiscriminately was a way to solve problems. This child's worldview was evidently already distorted. A life for a life. Have you ever thought of the consequences? The people I killed are people who deserve to die. Xiao Yi's voice instantly rose. Xu Yao frowned even deeper. Who deserves to die, and who doesn't deserve to die? What sort of standard do you use to determine that? Those who treat you well don't deserve to die, and those who treat you badly deserve to die. Little friend, you're not the only person in this world, and the world doesn't revolve around you. No one has the authority to determine a person's life and death. You said little fatty Zhao bullied you, and caused Linglong to fall gravely ill. This was originally his fault. Yet, you want to kill him, and use an even bigger mistake to repay him. Do you think that's the right thing to do? Xiao Yi no longer spoke, yet, he still gritted his teeth, and stubbornly lowered his head. Xu Yao knew that it was impossible to convince him in a short period of time. When she first saw him, she knew that he was a little beggar. Most probably, he did not have parents by his side since he was young, which formed this self-centered worldview of him. Furthermore, the notion of seeing oneself as the center of attention had already penetrated deep into his bones, and was basically not something that could be changed in a short period of time. It's a fact that Xiao Yi heavily injured little fatty Zhao. He should bear the main responsibility for this. Xu Yao stood up, and looked towards CMO. At the side, Zhao Yuanqiu's expression turned joyous. Grand Marshal Ant is wise. But, Xu Yao continued. Little fatty Zhao bullied people first, and was the cause of this incident. So, he himself should bear the secondary responsibility as well. Zhao Yuanqiu's expression instantly sank. Xu Yao did not give him a chance to speak, and continued. And you? Xu Yao looked towards Yuanqiu. As little fatty Zhao's father, you did not teach him properly, and instead, allowed him to bully his own sect members, which led to a fatal disaster. As the saying goes, it's the father's fault for not teaching his son properly. If you had discovered that he was not on good terms with his sect members in the first place, and had tried to dissuade him, this incident would not have happened in the first place. So, you are also responsible for failing to teach him properly. The enlightenment of a child's worldview came from their parents. If Xiao Yi's extreme worldview was caused by the environment he grew up in, then little fatty Zhao's arrogance was caused by him. Zhao Yuanqiu's expression instantly darkened completely. The corner of his lips moved, but in the end, he did not refute her directly. Instead, he cupped his hands and replied. This disciple thanks Senior Marshal Ant for your teachings. However, the corner of his eyes still ruthlessly glared at the child on the ground. All right, I'm not too clear about the sect rules either. Sect Master ZMO, see how exactly you want to punish me. Xu Yao stretched her waist, and gave ZMO, who had not made a sound the entire time, a done deal look. ZMO instantly smiled like an old chrysanthemum, and with a respectful attitude, he began to flatter her. Little Marshal Ant, as expected, you're wise. With this analysis, the matter is instantly clear. Chapter 19. Coo, coo, coo. ZMO lightly coughed a few times, and instantly regained his dignity. With a stern look, he gave out his punishment. Xiao Yi, you have heavily injured a fellow disciple, so your punishment is to cripple your cultivation, and expel you from the inner sect. I hope you will properly start from the beginning, and cultivate seriously. After saying that, he waved his hand, and a ray of light heavily struck onto Xiao Yi's body. The person who was barely able to sit just a moment ago was instantly lying on the ground. Presumably, his cultivation had already dissipated. Yuan Xiao, you didn't teach your son properly. I punish you to take good care of Ling Long, who was pushed into the cold pond by little fatty Zhao. If anything happens to her, you will be held responsible. This disciple obeys. As for little fatty Zhao, he's also guilty of injuring others. We'll deal with him after he recovers from his injuries. Zmo stroked his beard, and with a wave of his hand, he called for his 2 disciples to enter. This matter shall end here, all of you can return. Bring Xiao Yi to the outer sect. The 2 disciples received the order, supported Xiao Yi who was on the ground, and walked out of the door. When they passed by Zhu Yao, he suddenly raised his head, and coldly glanced at her. Zhu Yao's heart turned cold. This little wimp, he couldn't have become ruthless towards her, right? The hell, get this straight. Earlier, she had given face to old man Zmo, and saved him. Returning to Jade Forest Mountain with a heavy heart, Zhu Yan felt a deep sorrow. She had only joined the sect for slightly more than a month, but she had already been punished by the 2 peak masters of Medicine Peak and Weapon Peak. Such a life was simply too wonderful. Who knew if she would be slapped with a gunny sack when she went out in the future? She had decided that she would just be a serious shut-in girl in the future and go out less. Speaking of which, she was really fated with that little friend called Xiao Yi. Every time she went out, she would meet him. As for the strange feeling she had towards him, it only deepened after a few meetings. She didn't know how to describe this feeling. It wasn't hate, nor was it like. It was indescribably strange. In addition, his worldview had already deviated, which made it even more difficult for others to have a good impression of him. Especially before he left, the look in his eyes made her hair stand on end. She couldn't help but have goosebumps. It was hard to believe that such a look would appear on a 10-year-old child. You're back. The clear and cold voice successfully pulled back Zhu Yao's thoughts. Yu Yan stood next to the stone table in front of the courtyard. In his hands, he was currently holding onto a plate of fragrant dishes, as he looked at the people who entered. The feeling of being a wife instantly filled Zhu Yao's mind. Wife, no, master. The glutton Zhu Yao instantly swept away her gloomy mood, and eagerly hopped over. So her master was really waiting for her to eat. Yu Yan did not reply. Looking at his stupid disciple who had already begun to eat, he lightly sighed, and sat opposite her. Like a gale sweeping away fallen leaves, Zhu Yao swept away all the food, and she even let out a burp. Looking at her master who had already begun to clean up the bowls and chopsticks on his own accord, she felt that having a master who could do everything was definitely the greatest benefit she had ever received since she started cultivating. P.S. If you don't have convulsions. But her cultivation was really, master. An inexplicable sense of guilt rose from the bottom of her heart. Yu Yan's hand paused for a moment, and he lightly glanced at her. For a moment, Zhu Yao did not know what to say either. She tugged on the corner of her clothes a little uncomfortably. Until now, I have yet to sense any spiritual energy, so... Do you regret taking me in as your disciple? Yu Yan frowned. With a wave of his hand, he cast an art, and the bowls and chopsticks on the table automatically flew into the kitchen. He once again sat in front of her, and signaled her to continue. Zhu Yao instantly grew even more embarrassed. Cuckoo. I mean, maybe. Maybe I'm really not suitable for cultivation. This time when she descended the mountain, she found out that even the child with the worst aptitude had already learned how to take in spiritual energy, yet, she could not even sense any spiritual energy. It would be a lie to say that she was not shocked. Although she was really forced to accept him as her master in the beginning, humans had feelings. After interacting with him for so many days, Yu Yan had treated her sincerely, so how could she not be moved by his loyalty? Although she would not treat him as her own elder, he was definitely a friend, a brother, a bosom friend. She understood just how anxious he was to have a disciple. She had heard the disciples discussing in private. Her master could have ascended a long time ago, however, because he did not receive a satisfactory disciple, he suppressed his own cultivation, and was not willing to ascend. Yet, why don't you find another disciple? She felt a sense of guilt for delaying someone else. Yu Yan blanked for a moment, his brows tightly knitted together. After being dumbfounded for a moment, he suddenly reached out his hand to touch her forehead, and his expression became even more strange. She's not burning up. Master, I'm serious. Zhu Yao pushed his hand away. It was rare for him to be arrogant for once. Give him some face, and be a little more serious, all right? Yu Yan let out a long sigh, and immediately gave her a "why is my disciple so stupid" expression. With a stern look, he began to lecture her. In the future, don't descend the mountain too often, in case you learn bad things. She had only descended the mountain for a few hours, and she had already become even more stupid. The more Yu Yan thought about it, the more logical he felt. He made up his mind to educate her in a closed-door manner, in case she was influenced by others, and grew up crooked. Zhu Yao. From today onwards, until you build your foundation, you are not allowed to descend the mountain. Yu Yan sternly ordered. Master. She was locked up just like that. Yu Yan's expression turned even colder, and there was not the slightest bit of room for discussion. You entered the sect late, and are not as simple as a child. Your thoughts are clear, so it's normal for you to start slower than others. You don't have to mind it too much. In this period of time, you simply have to dispel all distracting thoughts and focus on your cultivation. You will definitely comprehend it. Cultivation is something that goes against the heavens in the first place. How can you be too hasty? But what if I'm unable to comprehend it? Then, you will continue to cultivate. Yu Yan firmly said. You don't have to worry. Even if you don't know anything, your master will still be able to protect you. So he had never thought of giving up on her. Mama's egg, what's with this feeling of wanting to cry? You master, who often loses his moral integrity, do you have to be so emotional, bastard? Zhu Yao fiercely rubbed the corner of her eyes, and only when they were completely red, did she stop. Master, I seem to have gotten into trouble when I descended the mountain earlier. Zhu Yao decided to tell him everything. Although her master was very awesome, if she were to be put into a gunny sack by someone, he would know who to look for in his heart. I seem to have offended someone. Yu Yan looked over doubtfully. Hence, she had no choice but to tell him everything that happened earlier. It was better to be safe than sorry. Since that old man Zmo dared to trick her, she would dare to snitch on him behind his back. Although I followed the sect master's intentions and let that child go, Reverend Zi Yuan definitely has a grudge against me. But Reverend Zi Yuan must hold a grudge against me, so... Yu Yan frowned. After pondering for a moment, just when she thought that her awesome master would pat his chest and say, I'll protect you, Yu Yan turned to look at her and said, Who's Zi Yuan? Chapter 20. After this incident, Zhu Yao understood that not only did her own master lack common sense, he was even face-blind. Who would be unable to remember the names of the various mountain lords after living for 10,000 years? With a personality like his, he had most probably offended all the people he could. Compared to him, she was really much kinder and purer. Hence, Zhu Yao was completely at ease. However, Yu Yan was a man of his words. He said that she was not allowed to leave the mountain, and in a blink of an eye, he removed the teleportation formation. Without the formation to leave, and not knowing how to fly on a sword, Zhu Yao began to bitterly accept the closed-door education. Yu Yan began to stare at her cultivation every day as well. However, even so, Zhu Yao still could not sense the slightest bit of spiritual energy he spoke of, as though she was a natural insulator of spiritual energy. Her master said that she entered the sect late, and was not as simple as a child. Her thoughts were clear, so it was hard for her to dispel all distracting thoughts and focus on cultivation. In other words, she was old, and thought too much. Zhu Yao, who knew the truth, tears fell. It wasn't her fault that she was old. At the very least, she wasn't in her 30s yet. Compared to the hundreds and thousands of people in the cultivation world, she was at the age of a flower, all right? She was someone who had been in closed-door training for 3 months without any results. Suddenly, knocking sounds came from outside the window. Zhu Yao instantly felt a little strange. Just who was it? In this jade forest mountain, other than her and her master, there was no one else, and her master had never knocked on the door. She opened the door, but there wasn't a single person outside. Only an exquisite paper crane flapped its little wings and stopped in front of her. The knocking sounds earlier were caused by it pecking at the door. This was the first time Zhu Yao saw a divine art like this, and she curiously reached out her hand. The paper crane obediently stopped in her palm, and instantly turned into a piece of paper with words written on it. So it was a letter. Zhu Yao picked up the letter. The words on it were a little childish, crooked, and varied in size. It should have been written by a child. The words on the paper were written. Ugly wife, you liar. Senior martial brother told me to call you ancestral martial uncle, but I won't admit it. Humph. Zhu Yao instantly understood who the person who wrote the letter was. At that moment, she felt her hands itching, and really wanted to spank a certain little friend surnamed Wang's butt. When did she turn from a nameless He, to a wife, and now, to an ugly wife? Taking a closer look, he realized that there was something else written in the corner. If he hadn't looked carefully, he wouldn't have noticed it. After taking a closer look, he finally recognized the words written there, "Thank you for last time." She sighed deeply. Was he thanking her for comforting him last time? Zhu Yao shook her head. The way this awkward devilish brat expressed his gratitude was also so strange. If 3 months wasn't enough to prove that a person was useless, then 5 years was more or less enough to be sentenced to death. In the blink of an eye, 5 years had passed. In these 5 years, no matter how hard Zhu Yao tried to sense spiritual energy, she still did not feel the slightest bit of it, perfectly explaining the deep meaning behind the word trash. Even she herself suspected that there was something wrong with the way she transmigrated. How could it be like this? Could it be that people from 2 different worlds had different constitutions that prevented them from cultivating? But the immortal arts and pills of this world were clearly effective on her. Zhu Yao stood at the peak of the mountain, and looked at the endless flow of clouds in front of her, silently grieving. From little Wang's increasingly neat handwriting, she found out that Wang Shuji had cultivated to the 10th level of essence a year ago. Among all the disciples, this speed was the fastest. Reverend Zmo had even personally taken him in as his personal succeeding disciple. Zhu Yao was happy for him. On the other hand, the huge sense of helplessness was about to crush her into pieces. Just what was the meaning of her transmigration? Urgent question. Waiting online. Kaka, your master is calling you home for dinner. Your master is calling you home for dinner. The cries of a crane interrupted her self-pity. Zhu Yao turned to stare at the celestial crane in the sky whose voice sounded like a duck's. Ever since she received Wang Shuji's paper crane 5 years ago, she felt that it was fun, so she went to ask her master about this method of sending letters. However, the other party misunderstood that she liked this method of sending letters. Hence, a certain master immediately imitated her, but he felt that the paper crane was a little low class, and did not suit his noble and cold image. Hence, he used a real crane. Your master is calling you home for dinner. Kaka, your master is calling you home for dinner. Kaka. Are you a celestial crane or a duck? Zhu Yao rolled her eyes at the crane that only knew how to repeat a single sentence, turned around, and hurriedly walked back. If she did not return, she believed that this stupid crane would continue to cry out. Yu Yan placed down the vegetables in his hands. From afar, he saw his disciple running back in a hurry. Satisfied, he sat down. Seeing that she greeted him, and then began to gulp down mouthfuls of rice, he lightly said. Tomorrow, I will be leaving the mountain for a period of time. Zhu Yao was startled, as she looked straight at him. A 10,000 euro taku like him would actually leave the mountain. Master, where are you going? In a few days, it will be the intersect tournament that happens once every 100 years. The 8 sects and 5 clans of the realm will all gather in Ancient Hills sect. The intersect tournament was a grand event that the cultivation world placed the most importance on. Ancient Hills sect was known as the #1 sect in the cultivation world, and every single intersect tournament would be hosted by Ancient Hills sect. Master is participating in the tournament as well. Zhu Yao was a little excited. Honestly speaking, after being here for so many years, she had seen her master cooking, sewing clothes, but she had never seen him fighting. Against who? Can master win against them? Yu Yan frowned. He could not help but knock on his stupid disciple's head. There are many people in the realm. In order to prevent demons and devils from entering, I have to reinforce the Great Mountain Barrier formation. His stupid disciple did not even think about it. Practitioners of nascent soul and above were known to have the ability to move mountains and fill oceans, would not easily take action, let alone him. Oh. So it was just setting up a formation. She had thought that she would be able to see her master take action. Then this tournament, just what is it about? Every sect will choose 3 people each for Essence, Foundation, and Azoth, and the top 3 will be decided. Zhu Yao's eyes turned. Not even bothering to eat, she picked a chair that was the closest to her master and moved closer to him. Master, it's going to be very lively that day, can I? You can't. Before Zhu Yao could even finish, she was stuffed back by Yu Yan, who casually added another stab. Unless you build your foundation. Master. Zhu Yao dragged out her last syllable, as she pitifully looked at the person in front of her. Building her foundation, that was definitely a legend. She had already been locked up for 5 years. Yu Yan continued to ignore her. Zhu Yao's expression grew even more resentful. Master, you're heartless, shameless, and unreasonable. The person in front of her simply kept the bowls and chopsticks, and without even turning back, entered the kitchen to wash his wrists. Chapter 21. Although her master treated Zhu Yao very well, sometimes, he was an extremely stubborn person. Once he decided on something, he would not easily change his mind. Just like 5 years ago, when he said that she was not allowed to leave the mountain, she really locked herself in this mountain for 5 years. No matter how she acted cute, threw a tantrum, or tried to reason with him, he did not change his mind. She did not know what he did, but in these 5 years, the number of disciples that came to this Jade Forest mountain were few and far between. Even if there were urgent matters, they would send messages through paper cranes. Even that little bastard, Wang Shuji, seemed to have forgotten about her, his only fellow villager. In these 5 years, other than the occasional little paper cranes that would fly in with a few words, he did not even come up the mountain to visit her. Little heartless bastard, the next time I see him, I will definitely give him a good spanking. Zhu Yao sadly gazed at the moon and sighed. The surroundings were so quiet that only the sound of her breathing could be heard, and the few silly birds that were flying in the sky just to call her for food. One of them was especially fat, as though it was drunk from flying, and it seemed to have crashed into something in the sky. It's falling. Zhu Yao suddenly stood up, pulled open the door, and ran towards the place where the red-crowned crane fell. That thing earlier was a human figure, right? The red-crowned crane crashed into a person. It had been a long time since Zhu Yao saw an outsider. As she sprinted, she wondered just which unlucky person would crash into a bird while flying on a flying sword. After running all the way to the middle of the mountain, Zhu Yao finally saw the unlucky person who had fallen on the ground. Dressed in the sect's white uniform, he was dodging left and right while hugging his head. At the side, a human-sized red-crowned crane was currently raising its head and pecking at that person's body. "Oh, stop, stop, stop. Don't bite, don't bite. If you bite again, I will attack." The youth seemed to have twisted his leg, and was currently desperately protecting his head. "Stupid bird, stop." The moment Zhu Yao called out, that extremely aggressive red-crowned crane, this horse, flapped its wings and flew towards Zhu Yao. With an arrogant cry, it then flapped its wings towards Zhu Yao. That look was as though it was asking for credit, expressing that it had caught a spy. Zhu Yao stroked the red-crowned crane's neck, comforted it for a moment, and then looked towards the youth on the ground. The red-crowned crane was a first-ranked spiritual beast, and only possessed a little bit of intelligence. Any Essence Stage disciple could deal with it. Yet, he only dodged and did not attack. It could be seen that he did not have any ill intentions in coming to Jade Forest Mountain. "Wife!" That person blurted out, and walked towards her with a joyous expression. This unique form of address, Zhu Yao instantly recognized who the person was. Who else could it be other than Wang Shuji? Wang Shuji was overjoyed and wanted to pull her hand, but the red-crowned crane beside him cried out and blocked him again. Its long beak wanted to greet him again. "Enough, stupid bird." Zhu Yao patted on the celestial crane. "He's an acquaintance. There's nothing for you to do here, go play." The celestial crane glanced at her, and then glanced at the youth. Only then did it flap its wings and fly away. Little wimp. If he hadn't called her wife, Zhu Yao really wouldn't have believed that this handsome youth in front of her was that spoiled brat from back then. Wang Shuji scratched his head in embarrassment and grumbled, "How many times have I told you? I have a name. It's Wang Shuji." Zhu Yao laughed, and sized him up for a moment. "Yes, yes, yes. Little wimp has already grown up, and has already grown into a graceful youth." After not seeing him for 5 years, the child who only reached her chest in the past, was already a head taller than her. The round bun face back then, now looked as though it had been sharpened by a sword. The little Shota back then, had already grown into a handsome man. Wang Shuji blushed a little from her praises. Coughing, as though he had recalled something, he politely bowed to her. "Greetings to Ancestral Grand Master." "Good boy." Zhu Yao habitually reached out her hand to stroke his head, however, she realized that with his current height, this action was a little tiring, so she retracted her hand. "You little brat, I haven't seen your shadow for 5 years, why did you suddenly think of meeting me now?" I wanted to come over." Wang Shuji anxiously explained. "It's just that Ancestral Grand Master set up a formation in Jade Forest Mountain 5 years ago. Without his permission, no one can enter." I was just casually walking around this time, I never expected that I would actually enter." So there was a barrier. It was no wonder that the number of disciples in Jade Forest Mountain could be counted with one's fingers, and they were all sent by the sect master to look for her master. Her master was evidently confining her, right? Zhu Yao gritted her teeth, and felt that there was a need to find a certain master to talk about life. Ancestral Grand Master. How have you been these few years? Wang Shuji probed. In these few years, when he had nothing to do, he would fly around Jade Forest Mountain on his flying sword, to see if he could enter to see her. However, he had never succeeded before. It's best if you just call me Big Sis. Zhu Yao pulled him to sit on a large rock at the side. Although I'm older than him, calling him Ancestral Grand Master and Ancestral Grand Master would always give off a feeling of youth that would never return. Chapter 22. I'm not worried about that. Zhu Yao sighed. I'm worried about the matter of you using the foundation pellet. I've heard from my master that cultivating into a deity is something that goes against the heavens in the first place. Using medicine to raise one's cultivation level is only temporary, and cannot be considered as one's own ability. But compared to relying on one's own strength, relying on oneself was always more reliable. Master himself has never used medicinal pills to raise his cultivation base. Wang Shuji fell silent. He understood this principle. All pills had pill toxins. Although it wasn't obvious in the early stages, it would encounter bottlenecks in the later stages of cultivation. It was just that in comparison, everyone was used to relying on the assistance of medicinal pills to increase the success rate of foundation building, so he didn't think about this aspect. Big Sis Zhu Yao is right. I have to rely on my own abilities to build my foundation. You are worth teaching. Zhu Yao satisfyingly patted on his shoulders. A spoiled brat had become a caring little cotton-padded jacket or something. She couldn't feel any better. Of course, if you really can't hold on, you still have to use medicinal pills when you need to. After all, only when you're alive will there be hope. Shuji understands. So obedient, so considerate, I really didn't dote on him for nothing. Oh right, what's Big Sis Zhu Yao's current cultivation level? The cotton-padded jacket fell to the ground. Zhu Yao held on to her glass heart, and silently turned her face away. Did he have to add another stab like that? Seeing that her expression was a little ugly, Wang Shuji muttered. I couldn't see through Big Sis Zhu Yao's cultivation, so I thought that your cultivation was above mine. Could it be? His expression instantly turned a little flustered, and he immediately began to salvage the situation. Big Sis Zhu Yao, I didn't do it on purpose. I didn't know that you had yet to take in spiritual energy into your body. Don't be angry. If I knew that you don't have any cultivation, I wouldn't have mentioned it in front of you. Don't worry, guiding qi into the body is actually very simple. I learned it in one night. Zhu Yao simply felt several knives stabbing straight into her chest. He couldn't help but cover the mouth of the person who was eager to explain. He gritted his teeth and said, Can we not stab him? This little rascal is purposely trying to stop me. Don't think that I won't dare to beat you up now that you've grown up. Deep in the night, in order to not be angered to death by this seemingly innocent little brat, Zhu Yao nimbly kicked him out of Jade Forest Mountain. Wang Shuji rubbed her but that had been kicked, waved her hand, and shouted, You must come and watch my competition. Only then did she reluctantly fly back, chased by a mountain full of red-crowned cranes. What competition was there to watch? She had to be able to leave as well. If it wasn't for the sect grand competition and his master going out to reinforce the formation, that little bastard Wang Shuji might not have been able to enter. Sigh, as expected, a little bastard is a little bastard. No matter how pure he looks, he can't change his nature of being a scammer. Zhu Yao decided to not reply to his letters for 3 months. Recalling that brat's cultivation, and then thinking about her own, Zhu Yao sighed. She walked around the courtyard and sat cross-legged on the grass in the courtyard, sensing the spiritual aura that she hadn't felt for the past 5 years. The night of Jade Forest Mountain was filled with silence. Probably because her master had yet to return, it was even quieter. Zhu Yao took a deep breath, and for a moment, her mind was completely blank. She faintly felt something warm surrounding her. With a thought, she instantly saw countless specks of light revolving around her surroundings. What were these specks of light? She clearly did not open her eyes, yet she could clearly sense them. Could this be spiritual aura? Zhu Yao was instantly excited. 5 years. After waiting for 5 years, she finally sensed spiritual aura. Some of the specks of light were scattered around, while some of them formed into clusters, dancing in the air. As though they were alive, some of them even mischievously approached her, and lightly brushed past her face, as though they were trying to express their affection. The specks of light came in various colors, and among them, there was a type of spiritual aura that looked like a silver tail, which made her feel extremely close to it. It should be lightning spiritual aura. Zhu Yao suppressed the excitement in the depths of her heart, and recalled the method of circulating spiritual aura that her master had told her. She used her heart to sense those silver specks of light, and wholeheartedly wanted them to enter her body. Just as this thought flashed through her mind, the specks of light seemed to have received some sort of guidance, as they leaped and flew towards her. Before Zhu Yao could even feel happy, she realized that she was like a bottle whose cap had been pulled open. The lightning spiritual aura was rushing into her body, and she was basically unable to control it at all. In just a few seconds, it had already filled all the meridians in her body. However, the spiritual aura still continued to drill into her body. Her meridians were swollen, and the pain spread from the top of her head to the tip of her toes. Immediately after, she seemed to hear a pu sound in her mind, as though something was shattering. The spiritual aura that was obstructed instantly became smooth, and continued to flow in endlessly. Then, it continued to be filled up, and she continued to break through. This cycle repeated. Every single time, she would experience that pain, and it would become even more intense. What Zhu Yao did not know was that her cultivation was madly rising at an astonishing speed as well. First level of essence, second level of essence, third level of essence. Suddenly, an immense pain descended. It was an indescribable pain, and she felt as though her body was being forcefully torn apart, as though she was going to be torn into pieces. From the tip of her toes to her hair, not a single part of her body did not feel pain. It was as though something was about to explode out of her body. Zhu Yao fell onto the ground, and no matter what she did, she was unable to get rid of that pain. Blood was already seeping out from her eyes, ears, mouth, and nose. Her blood vessels were about to burst, and her entire body was already dyed red with blood. Zhu Yao felt as though she was going to die in the next moment. Yu Yan, who was currently reinforcing the formation with the sect master on the surface of the sea below Ancient Hill Sept, had a change in expression. Turning around, he headed towards Jade Forest Mountain. Ancestral martial uncle. Because he suddenly retracted his hand, the formation was on the verge of collapsing. ZMO had no choice but to bite the bullet and fill in the gaps. When he turned around, he could no longer find his figure. Ancestral martial uncle, you can't trick a junior like this. The great mountain barrier formation, he was not able to hold on. With his fastest speed, Yu Yan returned to Jade Forest Mountain. At that moment, he felt the imprint he left on his disciple's forehead was instantly activated. That was a sensing mystic art that only a master would have for his personal succeeding disciple, and it would only be activated in moments of life and death. His disciple was clearly in Jade Forest Mountain. Just what was it that could threaten her life? Before even reaching the mountain peak, he had already felt the lightning spiritual energy rampaging. He was a lightning spirit vein holder as well, so he was rather familiar with this type of spiritual energy. However, in this current situation, it was as though the lightning spiritual energy in the sky and earth were being attracted by something, as they surged towards the peak of Jade Forest Mountain. Even if it was the strongest spirit-gathering formation in the world, it was impossible for it to attract so much lightning spiritual energy. Yu Yan flew closer to take a look, only to realize that at the center of the spiritual energy was his own disciple. Her entire body was covered in blood, and she was unconscious on the ground. The surrounding lightning spiritual energy was continuously surging into her body, and if this were to continue, her body would definitely explode and die. Chapter 23. Moss, Terror. The moment Zhu Yao saw the person in front of her clearly, the pain assaulted her once again, and she was about to faint again. Yu Yan tried his best to maintain her consciousness, and cast a formation that blocked off spiritual energy. However, the surrounding spiritual energy was simply too much. Losing the person who was guiding it, it instantly erupted, and began to attack indiscriminately. Calm your mind, and concentrate your energy. Hurry and stop guiding the spiritual energy. Currently, only when his disciple stopped absorbing spiritual energy could she stop the eruption. Otherwise, the entire ancient hill sect would be ravaged by lightning spiritual energy. Zhu Yao knew that the current situation was terrible as well. She once again climbed up and began to meditate. Following her master's instructions, she stopped absorbing spiritual energy. A few minutes later, the violent spiritual energy slowly calmed down, and began to dissipate. Yu Yan released the formation, and carefully looked at his own disciple, only to realize that she was already a foundation paragon. Even Sovereign Yu Yan, who was experienced and knowledgeable, was a little shocked by his own disciple. Just what kind of disciple did he take in? In these 5 years, she could not even guide spiritual energy into her body, and the moment she learned it, she immediately began to jump levels. Master. Zhu Yao felt that her body was different as well. However, just what was going on with that situation earlier? Was it a golden finger that came late? Don't think too much. Yu Yan casted dirt removal art on her, cleaning up the bloodstains on her body. Carrying his disciple who was already exhausted, he entered the house and covered her with a blanket. Rest first. Do not mention today's matter to anyone else. Zhu Yao nodded. Seeing that she had closed her eyes, Yu Yan then turned and left the house. Raising his head, he looked at the lightning spiritual energy that had yet to disperse in the sky. A certain master was a little troubled. Raising one's cultivation relied on spiritual energy, and the amount required for every type of spirit vein was different. As for how much spiritual energy one could absorb, it depended on a person's ability to sense spiritual energy, as well as their affinity with the spiritual energy. Even when he was competing to become a demigod, he had never seen such a terrifying lightning spiritual energy rampage. To be able to cause such a terrifying scene, there were only 2 possibilities. 1. His disciple possessed a heaven-defying god's artifact, which could condense lightning spiritual energy. However, after living for so many years, he had never heard of such a god's artifact in the world. Even the legendary Desolate Era, which was filled with treasures, did not exist. Furthermore, whenever a god's artifact appeared, there would definitely be a phenomenon in the world, so it was impossible for it not to be known. Furthermore, with her stupid disciple's IQ, everything was written on his face. It was impossible for him to have such thoughts and hide it from everyone. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for him to not have learned how to draw qi into his body in the past 5 years. In this way, there was only one possibility left. His disciple's affinity with the lightning spiritual energy had already reached an unimaginable level, which was why the lightning spiritual energy was scrambling to drill into her body. Sigh, it looked like he had taken in a very big trouble, but who asked her to be his disciple? Zhu Yao slept for an entire day and night. When she woke up, she simply felt refreshed, and her entire body was filled with an endless amount of energy. It was as though, in a single night, her eyes and ears had become sharper and sharper. In the past, she had always felt that Jade Forest Mountain was cold and deserted, and with a single glance, she could not see many living beings. Now, as long as he focused for a moment, he would be able to hear the cries of birds in the forest, the cries of insects amidst the leaves, the echoes of the flapping wings of butterflies amidst the flowers, and he could even occasionally hear the frolicking between the outer disciples of Jade Forest Mountain. This was an experience she had never experienced before, causing Zhu Yao to push open the door at the very first moment, as the feeling of welcoming a new world rose in her heart. As expected, she did not transmigrate here to travel. The feeling of having a cheat was amazing. As though they had sensed her thoughts, even the lightning spiritual energy in the air had become lively. Zhu Yao's footsteps paused, as she looked at the misty little specks of light in the air, intimately circling around her. For a moment, they formed an S shape, and for a moment, they formed a B shape. She calmly waved her hand and dispersed them. "Humph, little bitch. You nearly took my life last night, so I definitely won't let you in so easily. There's no use even if you act cute. Master." The moment Yu Yan stepped out of the door, he received an unknown object flying towards him. Out of habit, he took a step to the side, and watched as her face landed on the ground with a thud. Letting out a long sigh, he had an expression as though his disciple was being stupid again. Zhu Yao patted her clothes that were dyed with dirt as she crawled up. She was not angry, after all, he was still her savior. "Thank you, Master, for saving my life. This disciple is unable to repay you, why don't I repay you with my body?" Yu Yan strangely glanced at her. "You're mine in the first place." What did he mean? Zhu Yao was a little stunned. What did he mean by, "you're mine in the first place"? This sense of déjà vu from a CEO's novel? She was just casually saying it earlier. This style of writing wasn't right. Seeing that she was beginning to act stupid again, Yu Yan explained. "You're my personal succeeding disciple. In the first place, she could only take him as her master, so she belonged to him alone. Repaying him with her body or whatnot basically did not exist." The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched. As expected, her master was an alien who was unable to communicate with him. Forget it, she was in a good mood today, so she would not talk back to him. "Master, what are we eating today? Wasn't it breakfast time now? Hungry?" Yu Yan looked at her strangely. Zhu Yao rubbed her stomach and shook her head. Logically speaking, she had slept for an entire day and night, so she should have long been famished. However, currently, she did not feel the slightest bit of hunger. After reaching foundation, you'll be able to abstain from food, and in the future, you won't have to eat anymore. If I can't eat, wouldn't life lose a lot of fun? As a foodie, this was simply unbearable. "Master, why don't we eat once in a while, and experience life a little?" Yu Yan was unmoved. "There are too many impurities in the mortal realm's food, and it's not beneficial for cultivation. Since you've already abstained from food, there's no need for you to eat anymore." Zhu Yao was instantly stunned. She silently decided that in the future, she would definitely not let her master see her secretly eating. "Since you've already built your foundation, then practice all of the mystic arts that you have memorized in the past." A certain master began to activate his teaching mode. Just having cultivation without mystic arts won't do. Let's start with the introductory body cleansing art. "Yes, my lord." "No problem, my lord." Zhu Yao obediently raised her hand. Yu Yan ignored her nonsense, raised his hand, and tapped on the center of her brows. Zhu Yao felt a large amount of information surging into her mind, and it was the body cleansing art. Actually, the so-called body cleansing art was to cleanse one's own meridians, remove the impurities in one's body, and allow the circulation of spiritual energy to become smoother. This way, casting arts would be even faster. Zhu Yao closed her eyes and sat down. Following the method in the art, she cleansed her own meridians. However, she had underestimated the impurities that had accumulated in her body for 33 years. After cleansing a few times, she felt an unbearable pain in her stomach, and rumbling sounds could be heard coming from her abdomen. She awkwardly looked towards her master at the side, only to see him looking at her like an unmoving mountain, with an expression that looked as though he already knew about it. Chapter 24. Thus, Zhu Yao, whose body had accumulated impurities for 33 years, squatted in the toilet for an entire day. Even with the cultivation of a foundation paragon, she could not even stand up. By the time she returned to the courtyard, the moon was already bright and the stars were sparse. She didn't know where her master had gone. Zhu Yao mustered up the last bit of her strength, and took a bath in the pool at the mountain peak. Only then did she crawl all the way back to her room. This body cleansing art was too life-threatening. From tomorrow onwards, she would abstain from food. This was Zhu Yao's most resolute thought in the house. She slowly closed her eyes. Oh right, she seemed to have forgotten something today. Forget it, I'll sleep first. In these 5 years, Zhu Yao's only achievement was to memorize all the mystic arts that could be cultivated under the Azoth core realm. As someone who had experienced examination-oriented education and crossed the one-log bridge of the college entrance examination, memorizing was a piece of cake. Furthermore, her master would often explain to her the method of operating the cultivation method. She had accumulated 5 years of basic theoretical knowledge. Now that his cultivation had increased, it was much faster to put it into practical use. Basically, he would learn it after trying a dozen times. Occasionally, when it was too difficult, his master would guide him from the side, and he would be able to understand it thoroughly. Hence, in the past 3 months, Zhu Yao had been desperately learning the mystic arts that she had fallen behind. There was only one skill that she could not defeat, and that was the imperial sword technique. Looking at his disciple who once again fell from a height of less than 4 meters, Yu Yan let out a long sigh. Zhu Yao wanted to cry, but no tears came out. Crawling up, she picked up the long sword at the side, her face was filled with defeat. No matter how powerful an immortal was, he would not be able to withstand acrophobia. That's right, Zhu Yao was afraid of heights. At places that were slightly higher, her legs had already turned soft, let alone when she was standing on such a tiny sword, flying around. It's scary, okay? Master, can I not use a sword? As an immortal cultivator, not being able to fly was indeed very degrading. It was just that her fear of heights was an irresistible reason. I'm really afraid of heights. My legs turn to jelly when I stand on it. It would be better to change to a wider weapon and have a wider field of vision. At least she would feel safer. Yu Yan glanced at her, and seriously began to ponder this question. Actually, in Ancient Hill's sect, there were indeed people with various types of weapons, and there were various types of flying mystic tools as well. However, the majority of them were swords, because swords were still the most powerful of all weapons. Furthermore, Ancient Hill's sect was famed for their sword arts. He was also good at swordsmanship. What kind of weapon do you want? I'm not asking for much. I just want something that's a little wide, easy to use, and can be used both offensively and defensively. It's best if it can shrink and contract freely. Yu Yan sighed, and pondered for a moment. Regarding the weapon, I will think of a way. For the next few days, practice more of the other mystic arts. A month later, follow me to participate in the intersect tournament. The intersect tournament. In that case, she could leave the mountain. Wait a minute. Do I have to participate as well? She didn't even know how to ride a sword. If she went, she would be instantly killed. Didn't they say that only the top 3 in the sect's martial arts competition could participate? Yu Yan indifferently glanced at her. You just have to watch. So they were just onlookers, but why did she feel inexplicably displeased with her master's gaze? Although you are already in the foundation building realm, your cultivation has advanced too quickly, and you are not proficient in many spells. Watching other people's fights will be beneficial to you. Zhu Yao nodded. Indeed, her actual combat experience was equivalent to 0. Although she had learned the spells by rote, it was still a problem to see if she could put them to use. Even if the opponent's cultivation was much lower than hers, if they were to fight, she might not be able to win. This was just like learning multiplication in the beginning. Anyone could memorize the multiplication table, and multiplication of single digits could even be said out of their mouths. Everyone knew that 2 times 2 equals 4, but what about 22 times 2? This required accumulating experience and searching for methods in order to calculate it in the shortest time possible. The same was true for spells. Although everyone's spiritual energy was high and low, it was still the same. Although everyone's spiritual energy was high and low, the speed at which you attacked, and the way you used your mystic arts were all different. These were the crux of victory. Master, I understand. Zhu Yao clenched her fists. This was the first time she treated cultivation seriously ever since she crossed over to this world. Yu Yan nodded. After explaining to her the essentials of a few mystic arts, he turned around and left. Zhu Yao began to seriously practice these mystic arts as well. The majority of the mystic arts she practiced were lightning-type mystic arts, and their attack power was extremely strong. Like the lightning guiding art. As the name suggested, when the mystic art was activated, she would use her spiritual energy to gather a bolt of lightning. Her master said that when she reached the nascent soul stage, she would be able to comprehend the great lightning guiding art. When that time comes, it would not be a single bolt of lightning, but thousands of lightning bolts. There was another mystic art called Heavenly Descent. It was currently the strongest mystic art she knew. With her current spiritual energy, she could barely cast it once. The difference between Heavenly Descent and Lightning Guiding art was that Lightning Guiding simply used her own spiritual energy to form lightning bolts. As for Heavenly Descent, it would directly attract heavenly lightning bolts to descend. However, this mystic art could completely drain her spiritual energy once it was cast. If she missed, she could only lie on the ground and wait for death. Of course, other than these, she still needed to use other types of mystic arts as well. However, she had to first convert the lightning spiritual energy in her body into the corresponding spiritual energy that could be used to cast mystic arts, before she could cast them. For example, the fireball art. She had to first convert her lightning spiritual energy into fire spiritual energy before she could cast it. Putting aside the fact that this was time-consuming, it was even more exhausting. However, it was impossible for a practitioner to only use one type of mystic art. Her master had also said that she could not focus on only one type. As a lightning spirit vein holder, she would only be considered capable if she could learn other types of mystic arts well. A month later. It was the day of the intersect tournament. 3 days ago, Zhu Yao felt that the atmosphere in the sect was different. Even the usually cold Jade Forest Mountain would occasionally have disciples passing by. Although they could not enter, with Zhu Yao's current divine sense, she could still sense them. Zhu Yao felt that a huge wave of excitement was approaching. However, she could not leave. Ever since her spiritual energy went berserk back then, her master once again reinforced the formation. This time, even paper cranes could not fly in. After knowing the truth, Zhu Yao's tears fell. Although her master had once promised to bring her out to watch the tournament, in these 3 days, she simply could not find his figure. She had turned the entire Jade Forest mountain upside down, yet, she could not find her master's figure. No, to be precise, she had not seen her own master for a month. After he taught her mystic arts that day, he disappeared. Although he would often disappear without a single word in the past, it had never been this long. If not because she could not leave Jade Forest Mountain, she would have reported his disappearance to the sect master. "Master, hurry and come back to walk your disciple. I want to go out. Scratch the door." Zhu Yao bitterly waited for an entire morning, and only when it was noon, did her master, who had disappeared for a month, finally return. Zhu Yao could not help but shoot 100,000 volts of resentment light wave at him. Chapter 25. Yu Yan reached out his hand and passed her a jade tablet. Zhu Yao took a closer look. Why does this jade tablet look so familiar? Isn't this the identity jade tablet she received 5 years ago? Because she could not open it without spiritual energy, she had long thrown it to God knows where. "Master, where did you find it?" She had even forgotten about it herself. Yu Yan did not answer, and simply instructed. "I have already placed the weapon you wanted in this jade tablet." Zhu Yao took it, and used her divine sense to inspect it. She realized there were a few sets of clothes inside the jade tablet, as well as a few introductory mystic arts. These should be the ones distributed by the sect. Next to the mystic arts, laid a folding fan quietly. She hurriedly took it out. She did not know what the frame of the folding fan was made of, but it felt warm in her hands. The surface of the fan was dark red in color, and there were no patterns on it. However, it carried a faint fragrance, and was very beautiful. Zhu Yao fiddled with it for a while. It was really as she requested. It could attack and defend, and it could expand and contract freely. Zhu Yao instantly fell in love with this fan. This fan, after opening, can be used as a flying mystic artifact. Its speed is not inferior to flying swords. He was completely disappointed with her flying sword art. If his disciple, Yu Yan, were to fall to her death from a sword, that would be too embarrassing. Zhu Yao nodded heavily, and fell in love with it even more. Touching the surface of the fan, she suddenly recalled the few days he was missing. "Master, you couldn't have been helping me refine this fan for the past month, right?" Yu Yan nodded lightly, as though spending a month's time to refine a suitable weapon for his disciple was not a big deal. Zhu Yao held on to the fan in her hands, and was extremely touched. "Master, you're the best. Your disciple will definitely be obedient, work hard in cultivation, and take care of you when you're old." The corner of Yu Yan's eyes twitched. His disciple was being stupid again. "Aren't we going out? Hurry and change your clothes, and follow me to the martial arts stage at the main mountain." "Yes, my lord." "No problem, my lord." Zhu Yao immediately turned around, and ran into the room. Yu Yan looked at the direction she left in, and sighed deeply. He did not know if this disciple of his was good or bad. Everything was written on her face, and she was too passionate towards others. She lacked the cautiousness of a practitioner, and if she were to encounter a bad person in the future, she would probably suffer a lot. Returning to the room, Zhu Yao impatiently took out all the items in the jade tablet. She had long learned the few mystic arts manuals, and after taking a glance, she stuffed them back. Those clothes were indeed useful. They were all wearing the sect's white robes. They were very plain, but upon closer inspection, they discovered that there were actually many auspicious clouds embroidered on them. For the past few years, because she couldn't open this jade tablet, she had been wearing the clothes her master gave her. The style was much better than by Yi. Who asked master to be so dexterous? However, today was the sect grand competition. She felt that it was better to wear this white robe as a uniform. When the school leaders came for an inspection, they all had to wear the school uniform. Naturally, she didn't want to be an exception. She quickly changed her clothes and followed her master out. It wasn't until she stood on the fan that she realized how good this weapon was. After injecting her spiritual aura into it, the entire fan became many times bigger. Even 10 people could stand on it. Most importantly, the output of spiritual energy was the same as that of ordinary swords. There was also a defensive array formation on the fan, so when flying in the air, not even a trace of wind could blow in. Zhu Yao silently gave her master 32 likes. The arena for the intersect tournament was set up beside the main peak. Zhu Yao had thought that it would be like those sparring arenas used to find a spouse in ancient times, where a simple stage was built. She never expected that there would be a floating mountain there. Calling it a mountain was a little exaggerated, but it was still the size of 3 soccer fields. There was only a ring of tall platforms built around it. And, facing the direction of the arena, there was an especially tall platform. On top of it, there were a few floating chairs, and a few people were seated there. Their clothes were all different. Needless to say, there were 5 white-robed people. They were definitely the mountain lords of the various peaks in Ancient Hills sect. Most probably, they were the sect masters of the other sects who brought their disciples to the intersect tournament. Yu Yan brought his disciple, and without looking sideways, he immediately flew towards the highest point. Zmo was the first to realize it. He was shocked in his heart, and immediately stood up to welcome him. Greetings to ancestral martial uncle. This great god had never participated in the intersect tournament in the past few thousand years. Why was he interested in coming today? Hi, old man. Zhu Yao came out from behind Yu Yan, and waved at him. This was the first time she saw someone familiar in 5 years. She was a little excited. Zmo stiffened, and coughed. He instantly understood. Greetings to little martial uncle. So he came to watch the tournament for his disciple. Zmo took a closer look, and realized that little martial uncle, who had yet to take in spiritual energy 5 years ago, had actually built his foundation now, and was a paragon at that. This terrifying cultivation speed, as expected, a great master produces a great disciple. It was no wonder ancestral martial uncle insisted on taking her in as his disciple back then. The others noticed the situation here as well, and their eyes shone. One after another, they stood up and bowed. Greetings to Sovereign Yu Yan. Their expressions were more or less a little excited. This was Sovereign Yu Yan, the #1 person in the cultivation world. It was said that he had never appeared in front of anyone for tens of thousands of years, and they actually saw him today. Yu Yan nodded, and without the slightest bit of politeness, he walked to the chair at the center and sat down. Seeing that he did not have the intention to converse, the others could only rub their noses, and return to their seats. However, they silently lowered the chair a little, and left the highest seat for Yu Yan. Zmo, whose chair was snatched away, he silently instructed his disciple to bring another chair over. Zhu Yao took out her fan, flew to her master's back, and stood with her back straight. My master is just that tyrannical and cool, and I'm tyrannical and cool #2. Suddenly, she felt a chill down her spine, and a cold gaze was cast towards her. She looked around, and she saw the eyes of a cold-faced woman. She looked a little familiar. Wasn't this the Medicine Mountain Lord she offended back then when she entered the sect? Her name seemed to be Hong Cho. Recalling that she had even scolded her back then, Zhu Yao cracked her lips into a smile, and instantly released a mocking aura. Yo, little martial niece. The woman was instantly enraged. She ruthlessly glared at Zhu Yao, and then, with a cold snort, she turned her head around, and showed the back of her head to Zhu Yao. Ha, being arrogant isn't cute anymore. This Hong Cho sure held a grudge. It was something that happened a few years ago. Now, she was even giving her an attitude. However, she was her martial aunt after all, so she was a magnanimous person, and would not bicker with a junior. Just as Xu Yao was planning to quietly watch the show. Suddenly, she heard the loud cry of a bird. Someone said, "The three sovereigns are here." Everyone present turned their heads one after another. 3 people, 2 men and 1 woman, flew over from above. One of them was standing on a 7-colored wand, one was standing on a white tiger, and the last one was standing on a jade lotus that was glowing with an extraordinary light. The 3 of them were all filled with divine bones, as though they were deities that had descended from the 9 heavens. Especially that female practitioner, she was as beautiful as the bright moon, elegant and holy. And the cry of a bird earlier came from the mouth of the wand beneath her feet. Looking at this imposing aura, the 3 demigod sovereigns of Ancient Hill sect must have arrived. Before Xu Yao could even be shocked by this scene that looked like a Hollywood production, suddenly, an overwhelming pressure came assaulting her. She was merely at the foundation stage, so how could she endure the pressure of a demigod sovereign? In an instant, her blood churned, and her dantian felt a heart-piercing pain. It looked like her cultivation was about to be completely destroyed. A hand reached out from the side, and was placed on her shoulder. In an instant, the pressure on her completely disappeared. Yu Yan's expression instantly turned cold by a few degrees. A pressure that was even more terrifying than before, along with a dense killing intent, instantly pressed back. Chapter 26. The trio's expressions were a little ugly. Originally, the reason why they released their pressure was to show off Ancient Hill's might. This was to achieve the goal of intimidating the other celestial sects. Who knew that this great god would be here? In the end, he had kissed the horse's leg. The 3 venerables couldn't help but feel a little awkward, but they reacted quickly and quickly retracted their auras. They stepped forward and bowed. "Greetings, martial uncle." Yu Yan glanced at the 3 of them, and continued to channel some spiritual energy into his stupid disciple. After confirming that she was fine, he retracted his hand, and lightly replied, "Amen." Sovereign Iran was the first to notice Xu Yao, who was standing at the side. He had the friendliest personality among the 3 sovereigns in the first place, so he took the initiative to greet her. Could this be the little junior martial sister whom martial uncle has just taken in? He suddenly understood why senior martial uncle Yu Yan released his pressure on them so mercilessly earlier. So it was because they had injured little junior martial sister earlier. However, they could not be blamed for this. Seated on the stage were all sect masters of the various sects, and their cultivation levels were at least at the early stages of nascent soul. Who would have thought that senior martial uncle Yu Yan would bring his disciple here to watch the show on a whim? Xu Yao, who was called out, couldn't continue pretending to be dead either. She bowed towards the 3 of them. Greetings to the 2 senior martial brothers and senior martial sisters. Xu Yao had always known that there were 3 demigod stage sovereigns in Ancient Hill sect. However, they had always been in closed-door training, so she had never seen them before. Apart from Iran, the other 2 only nodded politely. Iran's smile was especially kind. "A few days ago, I heard that my martial uncle accepted a little junior apprentice sister, but I never had the chance to meet her. I never saw her reach the foundation establishment realm so quickly. Her natural talent is truly extraordinary. Senior brother, you flatter me." It seemed like this was a kind person. Xu Yao smiled. "Senior martial brother has always been in closed-door training, so I didn't dare to disturb you. Senior martial brother, please don't blame me. Junior sister, you're too courteous. If you don't mind, you can come visit me more often." Ran smiled even more happily. Suddenly, as though she had thought of something, she continued to ask. Oh right, I still don't know little junior Marshall sister's name. Since you've entered the Jade Forest Mountain, I believe you should be ranked with the Jade character. I wonder what your title is. Zhu Yao's expression instantly darkened. Friendly your sister. She dug into his heart without even opening her mouth. Gritting her teeth in anger, she said word by word. I am. You. Yao. When her words fell, Yu Yan, who was at the side, immediately turned his head, and threw a doubtful look at her. Wasn't my name given with the character Wang? Zhu Yao ruthlessly glared back at him. You're the one with desires, your entire family is filled with desires. Yu Yan frowned, and sighed. He silently expressed that his disciple's stupidity was getting worse, to the point where she could not even remember her own Daoist name. Then, he turned around and continued to look at the arena, while Zhu Yao silently shot daggers at his back. Seeing that the atmosphere between the master and disciple was not right, Ran tactfully stopped asking. After exchanging a few polite words, she sat on her white tiger and watched the competition. Hence, the stage was divided into 3 layers. The first layer was Yu Yan, who was still standing behind Zhu Yao. The second layer was the 3 sovereigns. The third layer was the mountain lords and the sect masters of the various sections. The dozens of people were clearly divided, and Zhu Yao felt that if she were to add a cup of cola, she would be able to get an extremely luxurious set meal. The appearance of Sovereign Yu Yan and the 3 sovereigns had undoubtedly ignited the passion of all the disciples. It must be known that the intersect tournament every year, to these disciples who participated in it, was not only a display of their sect strength, it was also a chance for them to make a name for themselves in the cultivation world. And, the victors of every tournament would be able to obtain a chance to receive guidance from at least a nascent soul stage senior. And today, the strongest seniors of Ancient Hill sect had all appeared. Putting aside Sovereign Yu Yan, who was the number 1 in the cultivation world, even if they were able to receive a few pointers from a demigod sovereign 3 times, it would be enough to benefit them for the rest of their lives. Cultivation was not merely about absorbing spiritual energy to raise one's cultivation. More importantly, it relied on one's comprehension towards one's Tao heart and the world, which was the essence of cultivation. And, for people who were able to cultivate to the demigod level, their comprehension towards the myriad of things in the world, and their Tao heart, would definitely surpass that of ordinary people. To be able to receive a single pointer from them, forget about an epiphany, it would be even more beneficial to one's future cultivation. Precisely because they thought of this point, all the participating disciples in the arena worked even harder, and raised their spirits to 120% as they competed. Unfortunately, Zhu Yao couldn't see it. That's right, she couldn't see it. Only when Zhu Yao seriously watched the competition did she realize. Mama's egg, forget about the fact that the stage was built high. Why the hell did they have to set up a formation that obstructs one's line of sight? Usually, those with high cultivation would not be affected, however, with her foundation cultivation, she was basically unable to see what the people in the arena were doing. As expected, there was a price to pay for acting cool. It was no wonder that other than the sect masters and mountain lords of the various sects, there were no other disciples here. So it wasn't that they were unwilling to bring people up, rather, they had long known the truth. Master. Can I go down and take a look? Zhu Yao had no choice but to discuss with Yu Yan, and temporarily went offline. Yu Yan glanced at her, and understood that she couldn't see anything here as well. Only then did he nod. After you're done watching, return immediately. Do not stay here for too long. To prevent herself from learning bad things. Of course, he did not say this out loud. Zhu Yao nodded, and looked around. As expected, she saw a familiar figure, and coincidentally, he had been looking in her direction as well. Zhu Yao immediately activated the weapon beneath her feet, and eagerly flew over. Little brat. Zhu Yao patted on the youth in front of her, who was currently looking around. Big sis Zhu Yao. Wang Shuji turned his head with a joyful expression. You're finally coming down the mountain. Zhu Yao nodded. It's because I'm outstanding. Wang Shuji did not refute her arrogance either, and simply held onto her hand as he smiled even more happily. Though, the people standing at the side noticed it, and came over with a gossipy look. Little junior martial brother, who's this? Aren't you going to introduce him? When did you get to know him? Brat, I can't tell that you're into this. Wang Shuji's expression instantly darkened, as he glared at him with a furious look. Third senior martial brother, don't be rude. Yo, you're angry. Yan Yuehong pinched a strand of hair next to him, the corner of his eyes twitched, and his smile was extremely warm. Don't worry, little junior martial brother. Although I, your senior martial brother, am handsome and lovable, I will not snatch her from you. Furthermore, senior martial brother doesn't like older ones either, I'm not into this. This time, Zhu Yao's expression darkened as well. Yan Yuehong. Wang Shuji was angered to the point where he looked like a cat with its fur standing on end, as though he was going to pounce on him in the next moment. Coincidentally, Du Yuanqin, who was not far away, saw her as well. Before Wang Shuji could explode, he cupped his hands and bowed towards Zhu Yao. This disciple greets ancestral martial uncle. This time, the person with the darkened expression was Yan Yuehong. Zhu Yao chuckled, and had Du Yuanqin stand up. Turning her head, she swept a glance at this person called Yan Yuehong. You're the third disciple of Sect Master's junior martial nephew. Chapter 27. Zhu Yao smiled even more brilliantly. So it's Little San. Little San doesn't have to be so courteous. Little San has never seen me before, so it's understandable that you don't recognize me. Ancestral martial uncle won't blame Little San, don't you think so, Little San? Thank you, Grand Martial Uncle. He finally felt that there was something wrong with her calling him Little Third. You're welcome. I'm old. That's the good thing about being old, you're broad-minded. Yan Yuehong. Didn't you say you wouldn't mind? Puff. The other two couldn't help but laugh out loud. Big sis Zhu Yao, are you here to watch my finals? Wang Shuji timely opened his mouth to change the topic. Big sis Zhu Yao was still the same, her mouth was unforgiving. Finals. You made it to the finals. It was already the third day of the intersect tournament. It was no wonder that her master had only brought her out today. It was to let her watch the finals. Yes, I'm in the Qi cultivation group. So she didn't know. Wang Shuji was a little disappointed, but she instantly cheered up. The next match is the last round of the Qi cultivation group. The winner will be in the finals with me. In other words, the next match would be the semi-finals. Zhu Yao instantly became spirited, as she looked towards the stage. He noticed that a competition had just ended, and there were disciples cleaning up the area. It was probably a foundation building competition, and the winner was a disciple dressed in blue. He should be someone from another sect. Not long after, the supervising staff announced the start of the next match. Two white-robed disciples flew into the field at the same time, wearing the same clothes as her. One of them was a middle-aged man in his 40s, and the other was about the same age as Wang Shuji. However, he didn't look like a handsome young man. Instead, he looked determined and somewhat familiar. This person. Big sis Zhu Yao knows this person as well. Wang Shuji explained. He's the Xiao Yi who heavily injured little fatty Zhao 5 years ago. Currently, he's an outer sect disciple. So it was that little beggar. No wonder he looked familiar. I didn't expect him to be able to make it to the semi-finals, and his cultivation was actually the same as Wang Shuji, great perfection of qi refinement. He's quite hard-working. This was definitely a drama of a loser making a comeback. Yes. Wang Shuji nodded in agreement. As an inner court disciple, he knew very well how difficult it was for an outer court disciple to stand out. His cultivation was abolished by Master before, but it only took him 5 years to go from being abolished to cultivating to the great perfection of qi refinement and rushing into the finals. This person is indeed very talented. Zhu Yao, who was even more talented, silently rubbed her nose, and decided to focus on the match. Xiao Yi possessed the metal and would dual spirit veins. The two types of mystic arts, one for defense, and the other for offense, complemented each other. He was a top-notch talent. On the other hand, the other party possessed 3 spirit veins of water, wood, and earth. Although his aptitude wasn't as good as the other party's, fortunately, the spirit veins complemented each other, so the flexibility of his spells was extremely high, and his casting speed was fast. The moment he stepped onto the stage, that person slammed his palm onto the ground beneath him, and a wood-type binding art was released. The ground trembled, and in an instant, several vines drilled out from beneath Xiao Yi's feet, binding him. Xiao Yi dodged with a leap, and landed 10 meters away. The moment he landed, vines once again appeared beneath his feet, and his speed was nearly twice as fast as before. With such a fast speed, it seemed like the opponent's mystic arts were extremely proficient as well. Xiao Yi could only continuously jump to dodge those vines, and he did not even have the chance to stay on the ground. The opponent revealed a hint of complacency. Forming a seal with one hand, he once again cast an ice-type mystic art, summoning tens of thousands of ice blades to stab towards the person in the sky. Since he could no longer land on the ground, then there was no space left in the sky as well. This was a watertight attack. It must be said that he had thought it through very thoroughly, and basically did not give his opponent any chance to make a move. Xiao Yi dodged the incoming ice blades in a sorry state. As he put up a barrier to block the attack, he was careful not to be entangled by the vines on the ground. However, if he kept dodging, it was only a matter of time before he was defeated. Finally, the barrier could no longer withstand the attack of the ice blades, and shattered with a resounding sound. Xiao Yi had no choice but to summon his flying sword, and with a falling sword technique. Using his spiritual energy, he formed dozens of spiritual swords, and flew towards the opponent. The spiritual swords were formed from spiritual energy, so naturally, they were sharper than the ice blades. In an instant, they shattered the ice blades, and flew straight towards the opponent. Just as he was about to approach the opponent, a large number of vines drilled out from the ground, forming a tree wall, and blocked the opponent's attack. Taking the opportunity when the opponent returned to defend, Xiao Yi finally found an opportunity to land on the ground, and once again raised his sword. This time, he used Falling Star Flash, and it was no longer 10 spiritual swords, rather, 10,000 spiritual swords. They appeared at the same time, and with heavy killing intent, they flew towards the opponent. And the vines that were left on the ground were sliced by the sword energy as well, and even the wall that the opponent had formed with vines was almost completely sliced apart. However, the opponent did not panic in the slightest. Instead, he revealed a hint of a smile. His hands quickly formed a seal, and a bright light shone in his eyes. Burn! The vines that were still lush and green earlier were instantly set ablaze, and in an instant, Xiao Yi was trapped within the huge flames. He had actually long added a fire-type mystic art into these vines, and his movements were too fast. No one actually noticed it, and he intentionally allowed the opponent to slice the vines. And Xiao Yi had used Falling Star Flash earlier, and materialized a myriad of spiritual swords, which exhausted a huge amount of his energy. Currently, he basically did not have much spiritual energy left. It seemed like he had lost this match. The opponent laughed lightly, his eyes were filled with complacency, as he looked at the huge flames that filled the sky. Suddenly, he heard a cold voice from within the huge flames. Return formation, activate. A gigantic formation lit up in the arena, and the huge flames were instantly extinguished. The opponent who was still laughing earlier felt his blood churning, and with a puff, he puked out a mouthful of blood. His dantian was already completely exhausted, and he no longer had the strength to continue fighting. He could not help but widen his eyes as he looked at the person in front of him who was completely unharmed. Return formation, reflecting the caster's mystic art. When did he set up this formation? Could it be when he was dodging his vines earlier? Victory to Ancient Hill Sect, Xiao Yi. The judge at the side loudly announced. Xiao Yi no longer looked at the person on the ground, and turned to walk out of the arena. However, he suddenly raised his head and looked towards the direction of the inner chamber disciple. His footsteps paused for a moment, and a moment later, he turned around and walked out. Zhu Yao was startled. That Xiao Yi was looking towards her earlier. Zhu Yao suddenly had a very strange feeling. This feeling was very familiar. Every time she saw that youth called Xiao Yi, this feeling would appear. In the past, she thought it was a coincidence, but now, she was even suspecting if there was something wrong with her. Logically speaking, as a person who had been a loser in another world for more than 20 years, she should be very interested in this loser's counterattack. However, currently, she did not feel the slightest bit of excitement. Just why was that? Big sis Zhu Yao, big sis Zhu Yao. Wang Xuji nudged the person at the side who was in a daze. Only then did Zhu Yao regain her senses. Another match had already begun in the arena, and it was a match between Foundation practitioners. It seemed like it was a rather important match, and the spectators outside the arena were especially passionate. Third senior martial brother will definitely be the first place this time, Wang Xuji said, filled with confidence. Chapter 28. This is the finals of the Foundation group. Yan Yuehong was a Foundation paragon like her. Wang Xuji nodded. Third senior martial brother is actually very strong. He's the first person to qualify for the finals among the participating Foundation disciples. Is it very hard to enter the finals? It's extremely difficult. He continued to explain. All of the participating disciples are the elites of the various sections. Every sect will first hold a competition within the sect, and choose the top 3 to participate in the tournament. The inter-sect tournament will be split into 3 groups. Every group will have more than 10 people participating, and only by defeating everyone in the group can you enter the finals. So that's the case. It seemed like this person called Yan Yuehong was quite strong. In that case, you're very strong as well. You entered the finals as well. Wang Xuji smiled a little shyly, and nodded a little embarrassedly. This brat, he was so lawless in the past. She never expected that after 5 years of not seeing him, his personality had completely changed. She merely praised him once, and he blushed so easily. Zhu Yao suddenly recalled that a month ago, she promised to watch him participate in the sect selection. She actually forgot about it. I'm sorry, Xuji. I promised to watch you compete in martial arts, but something happened a month ago, so I never had the chance to leave the mountain. When he competed, it just happened to be the few days when her spiritual energy went berserk. When she recovered, he had already finished competing. No, it's fine. Wang Xuji's face grew even redder. Raising his head, he glanced at her. Earlier, you called me, Xuji. Zhu Yao looked at him a little strangely. Don't you always emphasize your name to me? You've grown up now, I can't possibly keep calling you little wimp, little brat, right? Why not? Sure. Of course you can. Wang Shuji hurriedly nodded strongly, as though he was afraid that she would change her mind. He sure was a hard-to-please little brat. When's your match? Yan Yuehong had already won. Wang Shuji turned to look as well. It should be the next match. So soon. Zhu Yao was a little shocked. Coincidentally, she heard the announcement of the final match of the Essence Group. It was Wang Shuji against Xiao Yi, who won earlier. Big sis Zhu Yao, I'm going. Zhu Yao nodded. And habitually reached out her hand to stroke his head. She smiled. That person should be very proficient in formations. You have to be careful. Okay, I'll be careful. Do your best. Zhu Yao made a do your best hand gesture. Remember, winning or losing isn't important. It's fine as long as you don't get hurt. Wang Shuji stared blankly, as if she hadn't expected her to say such a thing. A moment later, a brilliant smile appeared on her face, and in an instant, it was as if the multicolored light was shining brightly. Zhu Yao reflexively raised her hand to block it. When she regained her senses, Wang Shuji had already entered the stage. Was that an illusion? Why did she feel that this little rascal's smile was so dazzling? The match in the arena had already begun. Facing this final opponent, Wang Shuji had no choice but to be more cautious. Coupled with that exciting match, he began to pay more attention to the people in front of him. Of course, Xiao Yi was the same as well. It had been 5 years. He had been expelled from the inner sect for 5 years, and today, he could finally wipe away the humiliation he had suffered, and seek justice for himself. Today, he, Xiao Yi, was going to let those people who had once bullied and humiliated him understand what was a strong practitioner. When experts fight, the brave one wins. Almost at the same time, the two launched their attacks. Wang Shuji possessed the fire-type spirit vein, yet, the first move he used was not the fire-type mystic art he was proficient in. Instead, he materialized several wind blades. Xiao Yi, however, did not put up a barrier. Instead, he slammed his palm onto the ground, and erected a mud wall to block the wind blades. However, Wang Shuji's wind blades were merely a feint. When the opponent materialized the mud wall, he had already moved to the back of his opponent. Summoning his flying sword, he swung it downwards. That sword was imbued with spiritual energy, and the might of this move was astonishing. And the opponent no longer had any spare energy to defend. Good. Zhu Yao could not help but cheer for Wang Shuji. That sword sliced past his body, and landed on the ground, emitting out a clang. And the figure in front of him slowly dissipated, turning into nothingness. So it was just an illusion. Wang Shuji's expression changed. He did not have the time to search for Xiao Yi's real body, and immediately erected a defensive barrier. As expected, the moment the barrier was formed, a sharp sword attack had already come attacking. It heavily struck onto the barrier. Wang Shuji waved his sword to force the opponent to retreat, and then, he leaped and retreated. The defensive barrier had already shattered. As expected, the opponent was not easy to deal with. Xiao Yao similarly held onto a long sword, and stared at him. The two of them were disciples who used swords, and were similarly sword practitioners. Compared to mystic arts, sword techniques were what they were most proficient in. Almost at the same time, the two of them gave up on their other mystic arts, and fought with their sword techniques. Xiao Yi possessed the metal and wood dual spirit veins. His sword glowed with a faint gold color, and was incomparably sharp. It could both attack and defend. And Wang Shuji possessed the fire-type heavenly spirit vein. His entire sword was already burning like a raging fire. The two of them exchanged over 100 blows, yet, they were still unable to determine the victor. If they were to continue fighting, they would only exhaust their own spiritual energy. Finally, the two of them had an idea. Xiao Yi threw out 2 formation flags, and a formation was instantly formed. Wang Shuji had long been prepared for the opponent's formation. He flew up, and instantly distanced himself from the formation. Xiao Yi instantly revealed a cold smile. Humph, he knew it. As expected, the inner sect was filled with cowards. Spirit increasing formation, activate. When his words fell, a large amount of spiritual energy gathered from all directions, and the formation on the ground emitted out a dazzling white light. Wang Shuji's expression slightly changed. He did it on purpose. Generously throwing out the formation chess was just to trick him into distancing himself from the heart of the formation. Actually, this was not an offensive formation, but a supplementary formation to replenish spiritual energy. As long as this formation was completed, the person inside the formation would be able to instantly raise their spiritual energy to its peak state. No, I definitely can't let him complete the formation. I can only stake it all on this. Wang Shuji circulated all of the spiritual energy in his body, and in an instant, sand and stones flew everywhere. Gigantic swords that were as tall as towers emerged from the ground one after another, surrounding the entire field. The dense sword aura charged towards the clouds. Isn't this a sword formation that can only be completed at the foundation stage? A disciple outside the field exclaimed. Just how high of a comprehension must one have towards sword techniques, in order to be able to execute a sword technique that surpassed one's level? Zhu Yao's anxious heart tightened even more. Little Wimp was really going all out this time. Success or failure depended on this one move. Myriad sword formation, scatter. When his words fell, the gigantic sword that was emitting out a piercingly cold sword aura, instantly transformed into countless tiny swords, and with an earth-shattering momentum, they charged towards the center of the formation. In the end, Xiao Yi's spirit increasing formation was still not completed. However, his spiritual energy had more or less recovered. With an extremely fast speed, he flashed out of the heart of the formation, and flew up. However, the myriad sword formation followed closely behind. He had no choice but to once again cast an earth-type mystic art, and raised a wall of earth to firmly cover himself. As for those countless swords, they still continued to attack the wall, and it looked as though they were about to break through his defense. Xiao Yi gritted his teeth, his eyes turned cold, and his determination to win flashed past. He definitely could not lose this match. He definitely could not. The earth wall that was attacked by the countless swords, in an instant, dust flew everywhere, and the victor seemed to have been decided. Suddenly, a sword aura that was even more terrifying than the gigantic swords earlier, exploded from within the pile of earth. Time seemed to have stopped for an instant, and the swords that were still furiously attacking earlier stopped in the air. Xiao Yi stood up from within the earth wall, and formed a seal with a single hand. His entire body was in a sorry state, but his entire body was filled with a sharp aura, and he shouted out word by word. Sky. Slash. He swung the sword in his hand with all his might, and those countless swords, at the same time, retreated in all directions, and only fell after crashing into the spectator barrier outside the stage. Sky Slash. This was an as-off-stage sword art. The myriad sword formation was broken, and Wang Shuji's spiritual energy was completely exhausted, causing a backlash, and he puked out a mouthful of blood. Yet, Xiao Yi had yet to finish his technique. The long sword in his hand pointed towards the sky, and in an instant, a gigantic spiritual sword appeared in the sky. That spiritual sword was even larger than the gigantic sword that Wang Shuji had materialized earlier by 100 times. Xiao Yi shouted out loudly. Destroy! The gigantic spiritual sword then descended towards Wang Shuji, who no longer had any strength to resist. Zhu Yao simply felt her heart trembling. The ominous feeling that she had ever since Little Wimp stepped onto the stage was instantly magnified endlessly. A chilling feeling instantly assaulted her heart, and her hair stood on end. However, her body had already reacted a step earlier. Heavenly descent. A bolt of heavenly lightning descended from the sky, and directly struck the gigantic spiritual sword that was descending, instantly shattering the spiritual sword into pieces. Xiao Yi puked out a mouthful of fresh blood. The entire place was deathly silent. Everyone's gazes gathered onto her face in unison. Awkwardness was no longer enough to describe Zhu Yao's current feelings. Mama's egg, she herself did not even know what was going on when she made her move. She looked at her surroundings, and then looked at the tall stage. My hand slipped. Ha. Chapter 29. Even more gazes filled with condemnation, like knives, were thrown towards her body, as though they wanted to peel off a layer of her skin. Zhu Yao wanted to cry. Don't be like this. What happened to friendship first, competition second? She really did not mean to interfere with the competition. Just when she was about to be swallowed alive by the surrounding people's gazes, a figure flashed in front of her, and a white figure appeared in front of her. A terrifying pressure spread out in all directions, as though it was a silent threat. Those dissatisfied gazes were instantly retracted. Master. The master who saved her from suffering. Yu Yan still had a cold expression, as he lightly glanced at her. The sky is about to turn dark. With a wave of his sleeves, without explaining a single word, he carried his own disciple and flew back to Jade Forest Mountain, leaving behind a crowd that could not even react in time. Zmo silently looked at the direction the two of them disappeared to, cold sweat dripping down his forehead. Ancestral martial uncle, you're so openly selfish, and left behind such a mess for him. Are you really a man? Deeply sighing, Zmo regained his senses. After all, he was the sect master who specialized in wiping his own butt. Coo. This competition, Xiao Yi is the victor. In this intersect tournament, he's the number one in the Essence group. When these words came out, the discussions in the arena finally stopped. Xiao Yi endured the tumbling blood in his chest, as he forcefully stood up and bowed. Thank you, sect master. Wang Shuji stood up and left the arena. This was an expected result. This competition was indeed his loss. As expected, he was still not strong enough. Raising his head, he looked at the direction Zhu Yao left to, and for some reason, a little melancholy rose. Recalling the scene of the falling gigantic sword earlier, he could not help but frown. Just as Zmo was about to announce the opponent's reward, he was stopped by a high-pitched bird cry. Sovereign Feng Yi, the only female amongst the demigod stage practitioners who sat on the wand, slowly stood up. It was just a simple action, yet, it was done like a fairy. Gently raising her left hand, Xiao Yi, who was still kneeling on the ground earlier, suddenly rose into the air, flew towards the tall stage, and stopped at the empty spectators' stand below the tall stage. You are called Xiao Yi. An ethereal voice resounded like heavenly music. Xiao Yi simply felt as though a heavenly melody had floated over from the horizon. Every single word struck his heart, and he could not help but kneel down. I am this disciple. Feng Yi's phoenix eyes slightly narrowed, and only after a while did she continue. Are you willing to enter my tutelage? Xiao Yi was startled. Not only him, even everyone present could not believe their own ears. A demigod sovereign wanted to take in a disciple. Furthermore, she was the only female among all the soul formation stage supremacies in the cultivation world. It was said that she had never accepted a disciple. Seeing that he did not reply for a long time, Fengyi lightly frowned. You're unwilling. No, this disciple is willing. Xiao Yi was filled with immense joy and emotions, and he could only bite his lips hard to prevent his tears from falling. Initially, he had thought that even if he obtained first place, he would only be able to return to the inner sect. He never expected that he would actually have such a fortuitous encounter. As expected, there were still people who treated him well in this world. He slowly bent down and performed the most sincere bow. Disciple greets master. Fengyi nodded. Forming a seal with one of her hands, a ray of light shot straight towards the center of Xiao Yi's brows, leaving behind a wand-shaped imprint. He was actually a direct disciple. Sounds of gasps could be heard from the surroundings. And all of this, Zhu Yao, who was currently being carried home by her master like a puppy, was completely unaware of it. The moment she reached the mountain peak, she immediately condensed an innocent face, and looked pitifully at her master. Master. I really didn't do it on purpose. I don't know what happened back then either. Really, I swear. Zhu Yao raised one of her hands. No matter how stupid she was, she knew that it was a one-on-one match. It's definitely because of that great spiritual sword. The moment I saw that spiritual sword, my entire body felt strange. You didn't do anything wrong. Yu Yan finally replied. Yes, it's not my fault. Master, what did you say? Her master coldly glanced at her. His face was filled with disdain. What that person condensed was not a spiritual sword. Ah. If it wasn't a spiritual sword, could it be a blade? Master, don't joke around. That's sword intent. Yu Yan lightly said. Sword intent. Zhu Yao was stunned. Isn't sword intent something that can only be cultivated by Azoth and above sword practitioners? In theory, that's the case. Yu Yan frowned. That sword intent was hidden very deeply, even a demigod stage practitioner would find it hard to see through it with a single glance. Since he's able to cultivate sword intent, he definitely has a mystical treasure on him. This was a definite sentence, and not a question. No wonder, he was able to recultivate to an essence paragon so quickly. It's not an essence paragon. Yu Yan once again gave her an idiotic look. That mystical treasure of his, not only can it conceal his sword intent, it can also conceal his cultivation level. His current cultivation level should be at the middle stages of foundation. Zhu Yao widened her eyes. Middle stages of foundation. Heavens, this was not as simple as the counterattack of a loser. This was definitely the rhythm of walking to the peak of life. A thought flashed in her mind. She finally understood why she kept feeling that he was a little strange. This experience was evidently the treatment a male protagonist received in a novel. Master, do you know what mystical treasure that is? A male protagonist who was bullied since he was young, coincidentally obtained a mystical treasure, and then, he killed monsters to level up, and from then on, walked to the peak of life. The more Zhu Yao thought about it, the more she felt he resembled Xiao Yi. Although I don't know what mystical treasure it is, it will definitely be of great help to his spirit veins. That's why his cultivation level rose so quickly, and he was even able to comprehend sword intent. Yu Yan frowned, and turned to look at his stupid disciple. Sword intent cannot be compared to spiritual swords, and normal mystic arts are basically unable to resist it. However, what you guided down earlier was a heavenly lightning. Although it cannot be compared to tribulation lightning, it's still the purest energy in the world. That's why it was able to disperse sword intent. Master, you're saying? Zhu Yao stiffened. Without that heavenly lightning, the other person would already be a corpse. Zhu Yao's expression instantly paled, and a lingering fear rose in the depths of her heart. Fear instantly invaded her entire body. Under a freak combination of circumstances, she actually saved this little demon's life. Although she understood that behind every single rising male protagonist, there would be a bunch of cannon fodder lying on the ground. However, she had never thought that the people by her side would become cannon fodder as well. Seeing that his disciple did not speak for a long while, Yu Yan raised his hand and stroked her head. Don't worry. Although he has a mystical treasure and a heavenly opportunity, your opportunity is not any lesser than his. Her heavenly affinity with lightning spiritual energy was so great that even a mystical treasure could not compare to it, right? Zhu Yao's thoughts were still immersed in Little Wimp's safety, and she nodded her head randomly. The more she thought about it, the more worried she became. A life had almost been lost in just a single competition. What would happen in the future? Master, you're talking about Little Wimp, I mean, Wang Shuji will be fine, right? Yu Yan's brows deeply furrowed. She was actually this worried about the safety of an outsider. Recalling how his stupid disciple was happily chatting with that brat earlier, and how intimate they looked, to the point where she had even forgotten to look at her master on the stage, he suddenly felt displeased, as though his family's good cabbage was suddenly eaten by a pig. He's Mo's disciple, if there's anything, his master will naturally take care of it. He coldly glanced at her, and gave her a worrying-for-nothing expression. Zhu Yao curled her lips. If it's not your child, of course you won't be worried, right? It was just a competition, and he had already used a killing move. Who knew if something would happen again in the future? Taking 10,000 steps back, even if he did not do it openly, he would definitely stab him in the back. She had a deep impression of Xiao Yi's twisted worldview. Master, do you have any defensive-type mystic treasures that I can borrow? Yu Yan's expression instantly sank to the freezing point. She wanted to gift his mystic treasures to that brat. His mood became even more displeased. No. Even if he did, he would not give it to her. He was not interested in raising someone else's disciple, and it was already very hard to raise his own disciple. Master, didn't they say that the higher a practitioner's cultivation level is, the more treasures they would have? Master, you're teasing me. These are all external objects. Cultivation depends on oneself. Master. Rest early. In a few days, I will teach you new mystic arts. After saying that, his figure flashed, and he could no longer be found. Chapter 30. Ever since then, Zhu Yao had pestered her master for 3 days, and in the end, she still did not relent. Furthermore, she realized that the more she praised Wang Shuji, the more thoroughly her master rejected her. Zhu Yao was even a little suspicious as to whether her master had been abused by the bear brat in the past as well. However, he became more and more diligent in supervising her cultivation. Her realm was basically stable. Master said that it wouldn't be long before he could break through to the Jindan stage. However, in the end, she didn't get the chance to form her gold core. Before the Essence Stage disciples of Ancient Hill sect broke through to Foundation, they would have to descend the mountain to train, and they would be led by a Foundation disciple. Evidently, Wang Shuji was in this batch as well. Practitioners going out to train was the best way to raise their mental state, and Zhu Yao, who built her foundation in a single night, did not have such an opportunity. No matter what, she had to give it a try this time. This time, her master did not stop her. He only warned her about a few things before letting her go down the mountain. When she appeared at the gathering point, other than Wang Shuji whose eyes instantly shone, even the corner of Reverend Zimo's lips was evidently twitching a little. However, he did not have any reason to reject her. As a result, Yan Yuehong, who was originally leading the team, was replaced by her. Under Yan Yuehong's resentful gaze, she walked towards her team. These Ascent Stage disciples were all in groups of 5, and Sect Master Zmo was very tactful, as he arranged her into Wang Shuji's group. Zhu Yao turned to take a look, and realized that Xiao Yi was in her group as well. Rubbing her forehead, this was really a godlike fate. The sect leader waved his sleeves and dozens of leaves flew out. They slowly turned into giant leaves and appeared on the square. It was exactly the same as the leaf that they rode when they first entered the sect. She had thought that it was some kind of magical artifact, but it turned out that it was just a common means of transportation in the sect. Under Zimo's command, all of the squad set off. As the temporary team leader, Zhu Yao called for her team to board the tree leaves. Wang Shuji bade farewell to her master and said a few words to Yan Yuehong. She was the last one to climb up. Seeing that everyone had arrived, Zhu Yao circulated her spiritual energy and rose into the air, following after the large group. In a short while, he had already left the mountain gate and was flying above the sea. Zhu Yao turned to look at her own party members. Other than Wang Shuji and Xiao Yi, the other 2 were girls, and they looked to be in their teens as well. They were as young as flowers, and compared to them, she suddenly felt resentment towards her own age. It seemed that her master was right to tell her to form her gold core as soon as possible. Once a gold core was formed, the difference between an immortal and a mortal would be different. After the gold core was formed, one's lifespan would increase to 1,000 years, and age would no longer be important. Zhu Yao was not familiar with the 2 girls, so she had no choice but to chat with Wang Shuji, who had been assisting her in controlling the artifact. "Hey, kid, what did you just say to little San?" "Mistress." Wang Shuji stared blankly for a moment before realizing that she was talking about Yan Yuehong. She smiled back at her and took out her jade token. "This is our mission this time." "Mission?" Zhu Yao was a little confused. "Aren't we supposed to head out to train? Why is there a mission?" "The mission is the content of the training," he said matter-of-factly. "Every team has their own mission." "Oh. Wasn't this just a business trip?" Zhu Yao's enthusiasm instantly diminished by half. "After we return, the sect will bestow a corresponding reward to the party that completes the mission." Looking at her dispirited look, Wang Shuji curiously asked, "What does Big Sis Zhu Yao think it's?" The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched. She silently swallowed back the topic of sightseeing, eating and drinking, and asking him where they were going to have fun. "Cool, what's our mission?" Zhu Yao hurriedly changed the topic. Wang Shuji injected spiritual energy into the jade token in his hand to check its contents. A moment later, he replied, "It's in the southwest direction, a small town near Serene Melancholy City. I heard that in the past month, nearly 50 people have gone missing in the town. Our mission is to investigate the reason." Serene Melancholy City was named after its proximity to Serene Melancholy Forest. Practitioners would often head to Serene Melancholy Forest to capture spiritual pets and gather spiritual herbs. Serene Melancholy City had become the largest supply city for practitioners in this area. And the location of the mission was a small town that was less than a few dozen kilometers away from Serene Melancholy City. The name of the small town was Serene Town. Zhu Yao casually asked if there was another town called Serene Town. In the end, Wang Shuji actually nodded. Serene Town was not far to the north. Zhu Yao silently cursed. This place sure had the same taste in naming names. Serene Town did not have a lot of people, and only practitioners headed to Serene Melancholy City came and went. Hence, it was not very prosperous. Zhu Yao and the rest rushed to the small town before the sky turned dark. For convenience, Zhu Yao had everyone change into a set of ordinary clothes, and found an inn to stay in. Taking the time to drink tea, Wang Shuji very consciously began to inquire about the missing people in the town. Seeing that the few of them were practitioners as well, the innkeeper told them everything he knew about the situation without stopping. Initially, since a month ago, there had been people disappearing in the town one after another. There were townspeople, and there were also passers-by, but they were all men. Furthermore, they were all strong and robust men in their prime of life. No one knew how these men disappeared, and there were no abnormal movements either. However, on the second day, when they opened the door, the people in the house had disappeared. The people who disappeared are all men. A little girl who was traveling with them looked at Xiao Yi at the side with a worried expression. Big brother Xiao Yi, then you, Zhu Yao remembered that this girl was called Ling Long. She had met her once 5 years ago, and had always been by Xiao Yi's side. It seemed like she was his die-hard fan. Junior Marshal Sister Ling Long, don't worry. Senior Marshal Uncle Xiao Yi is so amazing, he will definitely be fine. Another girl called Su Zi consoled. Turning her head, she looked at Wang Shuji at the side with sparkling eyes. Furthermore, there's still my senior marshal brother Wang. Senior Marshal Brother Wang, you will definitely protect us, right? Zhu Yao glanced at her eyes which were about to emit starlight, and silently glanced at little Wimp at the side. There's something going on here. First awakening of love, childhood sweethearts or something like that. These groups with their own little fans were too glaring. Youth. Wang Shuji's expression however did not change. Instead, he looked at her with a respectful expression. Ancestral Martial Aunt, how do you think we should handle this matter? Everyone seemed to have just recalled that there was a senior in the crowd, as they looked at her one after another. Don't worry, didn't the innkeeper say earlier? Zhu Yao waved her hand. Raising her hand, she heavily patted little Wimp's chest a few times, and said with emphasis on every single word. The people who disappeared are all strong, robust men. The two of you still don't meet the requirements. You haven't even grown your hair yet, you're worrying for nothing. Wang Shuji did not reply, and simply stared at her retracted hand. His ears were currently reddening at a strange speed. Suzy at the side, however, pouted her lips, and stared at her with a resentful expression. Even Xiao Yi and Ling Long had strange expressions on their faces. Did she do something that angered both men and gods? Cuckoo, rest early today. Forget it, it's more important to finish the mission as soon as possible. Tomorrow, everyone will split up and search for clues. We'll gather back at the inn at night. Chapter 31. Zhu Yao and Wang Shuji's rooms were on the 3rd floor, while the others were on the 2nd floor. Only then did she pull little Wang over with a face full of gossip. Tell me, does that Suzy of yours have feelings for you? He glanced downstairs with a suggestive gaze. Big sis Zhu Yao, don't misunderstand. She's just a junior sister from the same sect. Wang Shuji hurriedly explained. Really? Zhu Yao was doubtful. Then why are you so nervous? Really, today is the first time I've seen her. Wang Shuji became even more anxious. She raised her hand with a serious expression and swore, I won't like other women. Don't be so nervous. Zhu Yao pulled down his hand. As a parent, she was very open-minded. I don't have any intentions of stopping you. If you like him, then go chase after him. Big sis will give you some advice, you know. Grand Marshal. Uncle. Wang Shuji pulled a long face and looked at her with a face full of resentment. This expression was very much like how he looked when he was young. All right, I won't say any more. She flipped out just like that. She really couldn't take a joke. Zhu Yao hurriedly changed the topic. Oh right, earlier, I heard Su Zi call Xiao Yi's senior martial uncle. Why, has he built his foundation? Although Xiao Yi had a unique treasure that concealed his cultivation, from the outside, he clearly still looked to be in the essence stage. Wang Shuji shook his head. During the intersect tournament, Sovereign Feng Yi took him in as her direct disciple. In the cultivation world, strength was everything. If they were from the same sect, as long as they were cultivators of the same rank, they would be regarded as martial brothers. The higher the rank, the higher the status. However, venerables of the spirit-severing stage were an exception, out of respect for venerables of the spirit-severing stage. As long as one was a venerable's direct disciple, his seniority was only one generation lower than his master. Hence, although Zhu Yao's cultivation was lower than the sect master and the various mountain lords, her seniority was higher than all of them, because she was Yu Yan's personal succeeding disciple. Naturally, Xiao Yi was the same as well. Zhu Yao was dumbfounded for a moment. To be taken in as a personal succeeding disciple by a demigod in such a short amount of time, this was indeed the treatment a male protagonist would receive. He would be promoted, get a raise, become a CEO, marry a fair, rich, and beautiful woman, and reach the peak of his life. Wait a minute. Her master had told her before, that unique treasure of Xiao Yi's, even if it was a demigod stage practitioner, if they did not look carefully, they might not be able to discover it. In other words, it wasn't impossible to find them. On that day, aside from master, there were 3 other soul formation stage cultivators. Then, Feng Yi. What happened to you? Big sis Zhu Yao, big sis Zhu Yao. Wang Shuji nudged the person next to him who had suddenly begun to go into a daze. Ah. Zhu Yao's expression darkened. She had accidentally fallen into a conspiracy theory. It's nothing. By the way, Shuji, I'm sorry for interrupting your match during the Great Sect competition. It's fine, I know big sis Zhu Yao is worried about me. Wang Shuji replied indifferently. Suddenly, as though he had thought of something, after a moment of silence, his beautiful brows furrowed, and he said a little hesitantly. Big sis Zhu Yao, actually, on that day, I felt that something was a little strange. That spiritual sword that senior martial uncle Xiao Yi condensed, I kept feeling that something was a little off. The 6 senses of practitioners were extremely sharp, and at that moment, he actually sensed an aura of death. He really suspected that, if Zhu Yao had not acted, he really might have. Don't think too much into it. Zhu Yao stroked his head. It was better not to tell him the truth. In terms of luck and scheming, he was not Xiao Yi's opponent. Furthermore, going against the male protagonist would never have a good ending. If you don't like him, then just stay away from him in the future. Wang Shuji nodded obediently. Zhu Yao then gave him a few more instructions, before returning to her own room to rest. Early in the morning of the second day, the 5 of them split up to scout for information. However, after 3 whole days of scouting, all of the clues they obtained were exactly the same as what the shop owner had provided, and there was not the slightest bit of progress. Yet, another person had gone missing in the town. Zhu Yao reminded everyone not to be anxious, and to rest well, before continuing the investigation tomorrow. However, she never expected that Wang Shuji, who had already evolved into an obedient baby, actually dared to ambush her at night. When she saw that shadow sneaking into her room, and even had the delusion of climbing onto her bed, Zhu Yao, who had just woken up, was almost struck by lightning. The other party quickly grabbed onto her hand, and said with a low voice. Big sis Zhu Yao, it's me. Little brat. She then knocked on his head. What are you doing in the middle of the night? Did you touch the wrong room? Suzy was on the second floor. Big sis Xu Yao, I have something to discuss with you. Wang Shuji took out a handkerchief and a paper crane from the storage pouch beside him. What's this? Xu Yao took the handkerchief from his hands. It was a large red handkerchief, and its color was extremely flamboyant. Even the peony embroidered on it was red as well. I found this in the room of the last missing man. Wang Shuji explained with a serious look. Back then, I sensed a strand of demonic energy remaining on it, so I cast a synthesis incantation. However, the paper crane had not returned for a day and a night, so I thought it was just an illusion. But just now, the paper crane returned, so it must have found the owner of this handkerchief. You're saying, you found the culprit behind the disappearance of so many people? Wang Shuji shook his head a little hesitantly. I'm still not sure right now, but if we follow the direction the paper crane is pointing in, we will definitely be able to find some clues. Good job. Xu Yao immediately got off the bed, casually draped on her clothes, and signaled him to release the paper crane. Let's go take a look right now. Wait a minute. Wang Shuji took out another 2 talisman papers. This is an aura concealment talisman my master gave me before I left the mountain. As long as I stick it on, I will be able to conceal myself. Practitioners below the nascent soul stage will not be able to detect me. It could actually conceal itself. Xu Yao curiously took it. Suddenly, she recalled her own master, and let out a long sigh. Master, look at my master. 1,000 miles away, a certain master who was meditating suddenly sneezed. He looked around in confusion, and then continued to close his eyes. Xu Yao and Wang Shuji caught up to the paper crane. They left the inn and stopped in a small forest not far away. However, there were no traces of people in the surroundings. Not far in front of them were a few scattered straw houses, and the lights in the houses were still lit. They were most likely just ordinary people. It seems like the owner of the handkerchief must have stayed here before. Wang Shuji pulled out the bushes in front of him. He's probably searching for his next target. Xu Yao pointed to the scattered straw houses in front of them. His next target must be one of the few houses in front of us. Let's find a place to hide, and wait for the fish to take the bait. Wang Shuji nodded. Right now, they could only wait for the hare to come. The effects of the aura concealment talisman could only last for a night, so they could not waste it. The two of them found a bush with a good view, and just as they were about to sit down, a commotion came from the forest. Little sister Sue, listen to my explanation. I'm not listening, I'm not listening, I'm not listening. Chapter 32. Little sister Sue, listen to me. Xiao Yi pulled the person in front of him. I grew up with Ling Long. She's my responsibility. I have to take care of her. You're lying. What childhood sweetheart. You clearly like her. Suzy was crying her eyes out. It's actually a love triangle. Xu Yao immediately activated her spectator mode. She turned to look at Wang Shuji at the side, and silently patted his shoulder. There will be fans, and there will be girls as well. Tell me, do you want her, or me? Suzy questioned. Little sister Sue. Xiao Yi did not reply directly, instead, he pulled Suzy's hand, and pressed it on his chest. Do you really not understand my heart? Ever since I saw you for the first time in the plaza, my heart has fallen for you, and I can no longer find the peace I had in the past. Big brother Xiao Yi, every word you say, every action you make, and even every smile you give, tugs at my heart. It makes me forget how my heart would beat without you. I want to treat you well for my entire life, do you really not believe me? Yo, it's such a pity that Xiao Yi doesn't act as a poor auntie. Zhu Yao silently took out 2 steamed buns, passed one to Wang Shuji at the side, and nibbled on the other. As expected, the girl's anger completely disappeared in the next second, and her face was filled with gratitude. Big brother Xiao Yi. I believe you, I believe you. I'm just jealous. Jealous that the one who stayed by your side for so many years was her, and not me. I'm the one who loves you the most. Little sister Sue, big brother Xiao Yi, the two of them got closer, and finally, they stuck together, and then, they rolled together. The steamed bun in Zhu Yao's hand fell onto the ground. This development is a little fast. Why did it change from romance mode to dish mode, and it's meat dishes that are served? You guys are still in your teens, you're underage, hey. Xiao Yi had already taken off the girl's clothes one by one, and his pair of large hands were even moving up and down, causing the girl to pant. Big brother Xiao Yi. Xiao. Big brother. I beg you, give it to me. Xiao Yi smiled evilly, as he traced the girl's figure with his tongue. He replied passionately. Little sister Sue, don't rush, big brother will give you the best. Then, he took off his clothes one by one. Just as Zhu Yao was engrossed in watching, her vision darkened, and a hand covered her eyes. Damn, little wimp, what are you doing? You actually turned off the lights at the most crucial moment. Wang Shuji's voice was hoarse and carried an indescribable awkwardness. Grand Marshal Uncle, don't look at indecent things. Zhu Yao was roaring in her heart. This stinky little brat. Usually, when he would never compromise, he would only call her ancestral martial aunt. In modern times, she could be considered as someone who had experienced all kinds of high-class films. It was not easy for her to come to a live show, but she was not allowed to watch it. Although his eyes were blindfolded, he could still hear every single word of the conversation. And, brother Xiao Yao. So comfortable, let's continue, relax, my little cutie. I'll make you feel better. I don't think I can look at the word little cutie anymore. Brother Xiao Yao. I beg you, give it to me. Don't worry, you troublesome little demon. Sister Sue, big brother Xiao Yi, the passion on the other side was like fire, while on Zhu Yao's side, there was a deathly silence and awkwardness. The little person in Zhu Yao's heart was already roaring for more scenes. No matter how perfect the sound effects were, without any scenes, it would still be a trash film. She wanted to watch, she wanted to watch, she wanted to watch. Wang Shuji, however, tightly covered her eyes. Little wimp, take your hands away. Ancestral martial aunt, don't look at indecent things. Bullshit, didn't you watch it anyway? I didn't, I turned my head around. I don't believe you. I'll only believe you if you let go. Big sis Zhu Yao, I won't fall for it. You little bastard who eats alone. I went in. What? Zhu Yao fiercely pulled his hands away. How's the size? Is it big? Wang Shuji, Zhu Yao, the scene instantly became deathly silent. Only a series of discordant rhythmic sounds could be heard from not far away. Paw paw paw. Paw paw paw, Wang Shuji let out a long sigh, as though he had accepted his fate. He pointed to the house furthest in front of him. Earlier, I saw a red figure enter that house. His figure was extremely fast. Only then did Zhu Yao recall the proper business. Come, let's go take a look. The fish finally took the bait. This was most likely a single house, as there was only a single room. The lights in the room were currently lit. Zhu Yao and Wang Shuji carefully approached, and held their breaths to listen inside. Because they were still unclear of the situation inside, Xu Yao did not dare to release her divine sense to investigate. "Little big brother, this servant will serve you, all right?" An extremely seductive female voice sounded from inside the house. Then, the rustling sounds of clothes being taken off could be heard. It can't be, again. What day was it today? Why did everyone like to have a go at it for no reason? Could it be that having an affair was a trend? She recalled a saying in the animal world. Spring is here, and it's mating season again. It's winter right now, hey. It seemed like she would not be able to find anything today. Xu Yao pulled Wang Shuji, and planned to leave. However, Wang Shuji did not move, and had even made a quiet hand gesture to her. Yo, this brat, he's addicted to watching. Earlier, he didn't even admit to peeking. Wang Shuji saw that her thoughts were about to go astray again. Pulling her hand, he slowly wrote 3 words on her hand. There's demonic energy. Xu Yao's eyes widened. Calming her heart, she sensed for a moment, and as expected, she caught hold of an unusual aura, which carried a dark feeling. This was demonic energy. The two of them carefully moved a few steps forward, arrived at the window, and stuck their heads into the house to look inside. Inside the house, there was a man and a woman. The man was lying on the bed, while an extremely seductive woman was sitting on top of the man's body, moving up and down. The two of them were naked. Before Xu Yao could even gasp in surprise at the position where the woman was on top of the man, she saw layers of black miasma surrounding the woman, fluctuating along with her movements. A moment later, a ray of red light flashed out from the woman's eyes, and the black miasma surrounding her became even denser. As for the man below her, he was visibly thinning at a speed visible to the naked eye. She was absorbing his spiritual essence. The woman let out a long howl, and suddenly, 3 long tails appeared behind her. Fox demon. Xu Yao could not help but blurt out. Who? The fox demon sensed the commotion, and fiercely swung out her palm. With a loud bang, the entire wall instantly collapsed. If not because the two of them were fast, they would have been crushed into a pile of rocks. The woman's figure flashed, and she had already walked out with clothes draped over her shoulders. However, those clothes were merely a thin red muslin, and basically did not have any concealment effects. Her alluring body was faintly discernible. Xu Yao and Wang Shuji did not move. They had aura concealment talismans on them, and as long as they did not make any noise, people with cultivation below the nascent soul stage would basically not be able to discover them. And this fox demon, if she was not mistaken, should be a 5th-rank demonic beast, which was equivalent to an early-stage Azoth practitioner. As expected, after searching for an entire week, the fox demon was not able to find anyone suspicious. Suddenly, her expression turned cold, and she flew towards the small forest not far away. Chapter 33. Yo! And I was wondering who it was. So it's a pair of lovebirds who don't want to be lonely. The fox demon coldly looked at the 2 people who were entangled with each other on the ground, and a strange smile leaked out from the corner of her lips. The 2 people on the ground woke up from their passion, and hurriedly separated. Suzy screamed, and began to frantically search for clothes to cover herself. Xiao Yi, on the other hand, was extremely calm. Raising his hand, he summoned his flying sword, and pointed it towards the red-clothed lady in the sky. The fox demon, however, laughed even more arrogantly. With a wave of her hand, a light blade flew straight towards Xiao Yi. Xiao Yi completely did not have the strength to fight back, and was forced to retreat a few meters. The fox demon seemed to have no intention of killing him. She chanted a binding incantation, and restrained Xiao Yi. She flew down from the sky, and her smile became even more enchanting as she walked towards the other party. Raising her hand, she lifted his chin. Little brother, is she unable to satisfy you? Do you need big sister to help you? The fox demon's eyes were seductive. A practitioner's young energy was extremely nourishing to her. She did not expect that she would be so lucky today. Let go of big brother Xiao Yi. Suzy condensed an ice blade and attacked towards her. The fox demon's figure flashed, and the ice blade directly struck the tree behind her. The fox demon coldly snorted. You overestimate yourself. With a wave of her hand, Suzy was instantly sent flying. She vomited a mouthful of fresh blood and fell onto the ground. She no longer had the strength to fight back. Little sister Sue. Xiao Yi struggled with all his might, yet, he was still unable to break free from the restraints. He could only stare fiercely at the fox demon in front of him. However, looking as though he was naked, his aura had dropped quite a bit. Yo, little brother, don't worry. I won't kill you. The fox demon's smile became even more enchanting. An early-stage as off-stage cultivation had absolute suppression over them, and they were basically unable to resist. The fox demon once again walked closer, and touched his naked upper body. Big sister will treat you well. Just as the fox demon was about to bring Xiao Yi away, suddenly, a pressure came pressing down with an earth-shattering force. The fox demon's figure became unstable, and she directly knelt down. Her heart was filled with shock. It was a nascent soul stage practitioner. Little female demon, you still dare to be impudent here. An ethereal voice rang from the sky. A white-clothed lady stood on a flying sword, and froze in the sky. His eyes were as cold as ice as he looked down at the demon fox. The fox demon's heart instantly tightened. That white robe was the symbol of Ancient Hill sect. It was impossible for her to not recognize it. She was actually so unlucky to encounter a nascent soul stage practitioner from Ancient Hill sect. This little demon did not know that Senior was here, and had unintentionally offended you. I hope that Senior can forgive me. The demonic fox retracted all of her seductive and arrogant demeanor and bowed respectfully. How dare you quibble? The woman's expression turned cold. She waved her hand and a bolt of lightning came crashing down. It landed not far away from the demon fox, leaving a huge crater. You injured my Ancient Hill sect's disciple, and you still say that you didn't mean to offend. The fox demon was shocked. Her legs could not help but feel weak. Yao cultivators were naturally stronger than human cultivators of the same level. However, it was very difficult for them to advance. Naturally, they had an innate fear of sky lightning. As a result, when he saw the heavenly lightning that was casually summoned by the other party, his face turned pale with fright. Senior, you've misunderstood me. I was just joking with them. The demon fox replied carefully. She was glad that she didn't kill the girl too harshly just now. She then silently hoped that this nascent soul stage practitioner was just passing by, and did not know what she was doing in this town. Joking. The white-clothed woman was startled for a moment, as though she was really considering her words. The fox demon knew that this was her chance. If Senior does not have any other instructions, then this little demon will take her leave first. When her words fell, the fox demon had already used her fastest mystic art, and speedily left the scene. The white-clothed woman stood in the air, however, she completely did not have the intention to chase after her. A moment later, she slowly landed on the ground on her flying sword, and heaved a long sigh of relief. In an instant, that otherworldly expert's aura disappeared without a trace, and she sat on the ground without a care for her image. That terrifying pressure of a nascent soul stage practitioner had completely disappeared as well, as though it had never appeared in the first place. The hell, you scared Daddy to death. The white-clothed woman heaved a long sigh of relief. This person was Zhu Yao. Big sis Zhu Yao. Wang Shuji walked out from the bushes at the side as well, and supported the person on the ground. Are you alright? What do you think? Zhu Yao rolled her eyes at him. The entire incident earlier was a trap set up by her and Wang Shuji, and the goal was to scare that fox demon away. An Azoth-stage fox demon, even if all of them were to stack together, they would still not be her opponent. However, with a nascent soul, things would be different. Hence, she had Wang Shuji cast an illusory art in the dark to simulate the pressure of a nascent soul stage practitioner, and then, she would use heavenly lightning to scare the fox demon away. However, with her cultivation level, that heavenly lightning bolt earlier, had already used up all of her spiritual energy. If not for her stubbornly holding on, she would not have fallen because of her fear of heights, but also because of the exhaustion of her spiritual energy. Right now, she did not even have the strength to stand up. Thank you, Senior Martial Ant, for saving my life. Xiao Yi regained his senses as well. She was the one who saved him. Although he was unwilling, he still gritted his teeth and came over to thank her. Zhu Yao turned and swept a glance at him. Can you first wear your clothes before we talk? Conversing with her naked body, she felt a lot of pressure, you know. Big brother Xiao Yi. Just at this moment, Ling Long felt something was amiss, and ran over from the tavern. Seeing the naked Xiao Yi, she let out a sharp scream. Big brother Xiao Yi, you. She turned her head, only to see Su Zi, who was in a disheveled state at the side. She suddenly understood something, and her little face instantly paled. Unfortunately, Zhu Yao no longer had the strength to watch the great catfight that was about to take place. Initially, she wanted to watch a free romance/action movie, but in the end, the one who was as tired as a dog was actually her. She had Wang Shuji send her back, as she needed to rest and recover her spiritual energy. Hence, only the naked Xiao Yi, Su Zi whose clothes were in a disheveled state, and Ling Long whose tears flowed uncontrollably like the Yellow River, were left. Before the second day had even brightened, Zhu Yao decided to immediately return to the sect. Because she suddenly recalled something. Although her plan yesterday was foolproof, and she had successfully scared the fox demon away, she could not guarantee that the fox demon would not discover any suspicious points after thinking about it. If she were to return after leaving, at that time, she would really be wiped out in one fell swoop. More importantly, in order to scare the fox demon away yesterday, she used heavenly descent. And this mystic art, a lightning-type mystic art with such speed, other than using a lightning guiding talisman, could only be done by people with lightning spirit veins. And in Ancient Hill sect, the only person with a high cultivation level, and a lightning spirit vein, was her demigod stage master. As long as the fox demon thought of this point, she would realize that they had disguised their cultivation level to deceive her. Fox demons were a very unique type of demonic beasts. They were proficient in charm arts, and by nature, they did not like to fight or cultivate. Usually, they were third-ranked demonic beasts, and they were born with the ability to transform. However, they had always lived in the dense forest, and would not easily appear. However, evidently, the one they encountered was different. Not only had it risen to 5th ranked, it even liked to feed on men's spiritual essence. Thinking about it, the matter regarding the men in the town was definitely done by it. Those people did not go missing, rather, they died after their spiritual essence was sucked dry, and turned into ashes. Chapter 34. After the 5 of them arrived, Zhu Yao explained as she urged everyone to hurry back to the sect. Wang Shuji naturally did not have any objections. He took out the sect's unified spiritual tool and requested to fly it. Although the other 3 had their doubts as well, they followed them and boarded the leaf. The strange thing was, Ling Long and Su Zi were holding hands, and following behind Xiao Yi. That look of deep sisterly love almost poked her eyes blind. What's going on? They got back together so quickly. What happened to the promised great battle? Xiao Yi was trying to establish a relationship. As expected, she did not understand the world of Xianxia. Zhu Yao worriedly raised her head and looked at Wang Shuji, who was seriously flying the spiritual tool in front of her, expressing her deep worry. Big sis Zhu Yao, don't worry. Flying a spiritual tool doesn't require much spiritual energy. Wang Shuji thought that she was worried that she was too tired, and explained. Your spiritual energy has yet to recover, you should rest more. Who's worried about that? I'm worried that you've grown crooked. Zhu Yao retracted her gaze, closed her eyes, and meditated to recover her spiritual energy. After flying for a while, the sky slowly brightened, and the sun slowly rose. Only then did Zhu Yao's mood relax a little. They should be able to rush back in time. Yo, so anxious. Where are you going? A voice that carried a hint of ridicule suddenly resounded. Everyone's relaxed hearts instantly tensed up again. Fox Demon. That familiar red figure, blocked in front of them. It was still the same thin muslin, and the three foxtails behind it were currently swaying leisurely. Turning to look at Zhu Yao at the center, her voice instantly turned cold. So Senior is here as well. You don't look too good, I wonder if this little demon can help. Zhu Yao clenched her fists, and replied with a smile. I do want your help, but unfortunately, you're not a male fox. Understanding that Zhu Yao was implying that she was a slut, the fox demon's expression instantly changed. Humph, stinky brat, you actually dare to toy with me. With a wave of her hand, she summoned a white chain, and attacked her. Scatter! Zhu Yao loudly shouted, and flew towards a direction. The five of them each found a direction as well, and flew down, leaving that gigantic leaf. Under the fox demon's attack, that leaf-shaped flying mystic tool had already been shattered. The five of them landed on the ground and summoned their weapons to fight. It was too late to escape now, so they could only fight. However, there were 3 Qi refinement cultivators, 1 foundation establishment cultivator, and 1 hidden foundation establishment cultivator. How could they be a match for a golden core demonic beast? When the demon fox saw that her attack did not hit, she was not anxious. She descended from the sky leisurely and looked at the 5 juniors. Her smile was even more sarcastic. They really overestimated themselves. With a wave of his hand, he tossed out a few more wind blades. The wind blades carried Black Yao Qi as they flew towards the 5 of them. Find a gap and hide. Zhu Yao shouted out loudly, and everyone instantly understood. They searched for the gaps between the wind blades, and barely brushed past them. Not a single person was actually injured. The demon fox was a little surprised. Under normal circumstances, the first reaction of seeing an attack was either to dodge backwards or to the side. However, the speed of her wind blades was extremely fast. With their cultivation, it was impossible for them to dodge all of them, so injuries were inevitable. However, they just had to find the gaps between the wind blades to dodge. Putting aside the fact that the wind blades were released consecutively, there was a sequence to them. The wind blades were arc-shaped in the first place, and there was definitely a large gap between the blades. They did not need to retreat, nor did they need to dodge to the side. As long as they slowly moved between the blades, they would naturally not be injured. With this move, everyone was a little happy. Wang Shuji was even looking at Zhu Yao with sparkling eyes. Even Zhu Yao herself was a little confused. Earlier, it was really a subconscious reaction. She had played online games for so many years before she transmigrated, so she was extremely familiar with the usage of skills and positioning. Earlier, she simply thought of the in-game operation and blurted it out. She never expected that it would actually work. In that case, the other operation methods were interlinked as well. At most, she could just treat this demon fox as a boss and fight it. You're a little smart. However, this isn't enough. The demon fox coldly snorted. This time, she turned her hands into claws and slammed them onto the ground. With her as the center, a huge fire began to spread wantonly. The raging fire began to burn, and wherever it went, the grass and trees were all turned into ashes. Fly up. Zhu Yao instructed everyone to fly up with their artifacts, and tried her best to calm down and analyze the current battle situation. Their party had 5 people, but other than her, Wang Xuji, and Xiao Yi, the other 2 could be completely ignored. One of them was at the 8th level of Essence stage, while the other was at the 7th level of Essence stage. Being able to fly on their swords under the pressure of an Azoth core demonic practitioner was already not bad. They could forget about having any other combat capabilities. 3 against 1, it looked like they were in a disadvantageous position, but their strength was a one-sided suppression. Zhu Yao was a little anxious. No, calm down. There must be a way. The other party was just a boss, after all. Although her level was not as high as it, which boss in the game would not have a higher level than the players? Hence, the most important thing was coordination and fighting methods, as well as a sharp command. Even if their party did not have a healer, at the very least, they had 3 decent DPS. Her in-game experience told her that in a situation where there was no tank or healer, the only way to defeat a boss was to kite. Fly away from this ring of fire. Zhu Yao ordered. Bringing the 5 little ones, she quickly moved out of the ring of fire. Trying to run. It won't be that easy. The fox demon flew up as well, and chased after them. Zhu Yao summoned a bolt of lightning, and struck it towards the back, temporarily blocking the fox demon. Xiao Yi, use an earth-type skill on the one below. The larger the range, the better. When Xiao Yi heard this, he reacted, and released a dust sand art. In an instant, a cloud of dust flew, and the fire that was still spreading earlier, was instantly extinguished. When they landed on the ground, there were only tiny embers left in the surroundings. The fox demon, who dodged the lightning, became even more furious, and summoned countless icicles, sending them towards the 5 of them. Scatter, as far as you can. Find an opportunity to attack. Zhu Yao once again summoned a bolt of lightning, and signaled the other 4 to dodge in different directions. Then, she would occasionally pop out, and attack the fox demon. The fox demon lost its target, and was instantly flustered, as she crazily attacked in all directions. Yet, the people in the surroundings would pop out to attack her every now and then. A fireball from the left, a wind blade from the right, a bolt of lightning from the front, and an icicle from the back. She could not defend against it. Out of the few attacks, there would always be 1 or 2 that hit. A fireball heavily landed on her right hand. Not only did it burn half of her sleeves, it even burned her arm. The fox demon's eyes reddened from anger. She no longer looked left and right, and did not care about the attacks coming from other directions. Instead, she pounced towards the location where the fireball came from. You ants! And in that direction was Xiao Yi. Xiao Yi seemed to have never expected that she would pounce over without a care, and for a moment, he was a little dumbfounded. When he thought of using his sword to block, it was already too late. The fox demon's palm heavily landed on his body. Xiao Yi was instantly sent flying, and puked out a mouthful of blood. Big brother Xiao Yi. Seeing that Xiao Yi was injured, Suzy and Ling Long ran over. "Don't go over." Zhu Yao was basically unable to stop them in time. The targets that had finally dispersed were about to converge once again. Zhu Yao was only thinking of how to pull the fox demon's aggro back, and thus, she blurted out, "Grandson." The fox demon, who was about to kill her, was startled. She suddenly turned her head, and stared at her fiercely. "What did you say?" The game did not lie to her. These words were definitely able to pull aggro. Seeing the fox demon, who threw down Xiao Yi and the others, and flew towards her, Zhu Yao immediately ran. "Mama's egg, it's easy to pull aggro, but hard to pull aggro." Big sis Zhu Yao. Wang Shuji's face was anxious. He threw a few high-grade talismans at the fox demon, but they were all blocked by the fox demon. He had no choice but to use his strongest move, Myriad Sword Formation. Gathering all of the spiritual energy in his body, he materialized thousands of spiritual swords. However, spiritual swords like these, in the eyes of an as-off-stage demonic beast, could not even withstand a single blow. Although he could temporarily block the fox demon's attacks, the huge consumption of spiritual energy was not something Wang Shuji could sustain for a long period of time. Unless he could kill it in a single blow. A mystic art that could kill an as-off-stage demonic beast in a single blow, unless, Zhu Yao suddenly had an idea. Shuji used the sword formation to trap her. Perhaps it really could succeed. She had to try everything in a desperate situation. When Wang Shuji heard this, he immediately activated the sword formation, forming a wall of swords that surrounded the fox demon. The fox demon used the white chains in her hands to attack the surrounding spiritual swords. However, the moment one dissipated, a new spiritual sword would immediately replace it, and she was unable to break through. Zhu Yao took the opportunity to arrive at the place closest to the sword formation. She circulated her lightning spiritual energy, forming lightning bolts that attached onto Wang Shuji's spiritual swords. As expected, spiritual swords that carried lightning bolts were 100 times stronger than regular spiritual swords, and lightning naturally countered demonic beasts. The fox demon cried out miserably from the attacks. "Damn it, you bunch of ants, you dare to harm me." The fox demon's ferocious nature was revealed, and black demonic scars had already begun to surface on its face and body. It was extremely terrifying. Its cherry-like little mouth earlier, split open to the sides, revealing a mouthful of ferocious sharp teeth. In an instant, demonic energy surged into the sky, and the black demonic energy heavily emitted out. It looked as though it was about to break out of the formation. Wang Shuji puked out a mouthful of fresh blood, and the sword formation showed signs of collapsing. Brat! Zhu Yao was anxious. If the fox demon were to break out, they would definitely die. Fight it out. She frantically circulated all of the spiritual energy in her body. Even if her spiritual energy had not recovered, she had no choice but to take the risk and use Heavenly Descent once again. Zhu Yao raised her hand up high. The clouds in the sky surged, and white lightning bolts could be faintly seen. Just as the heavenly lightning was about to strike down, the heavenly lightning alone was still unable to kill the fox demon in a single strike. Zhu Yao had no choice but to turn her head back, and roared at the person behind her. "Xiao Yi, release your sword intent." After saying that, she reached her hand towards the sky, and a heavenly lightning descended from the sky. Xiao Yi was startled, and looked at her with a face of disbelief. He stood dumbfounded on the spot. "Look at your sister, hurry and release it, I." Pwah! Before she could even finish, she felt a chill in front of her chest. The fox demon that was struck by the heavenly lightning earlier broke out of the formation, and with a single claw, it pierced right through her. Only then did Xiao Yi's sword intent descend from the sky with a biting cold momentum. Hesitating your sister. A pig-like teammate. This was Zhu Yao's only thought before she died. Zhu Yao was dead. End. My ass. Chapter 35. Zhu Yao was dead. She had never understood the fact that she was dead so clearly. Because, Mama's egg, why were the words, completely dead, written on her corpse? Why was the fatal wound on her chest covered with mosaics? Was this a prank by the creator? Come out, I guarantee I won't beat you to death. And what was with the conversation window that suddenly popped up in front of her? It really was a conversation window that looked exactly the same as the one on a computer. It suddenly appeared in front of her, and it clearly wrote, "You're completely dead. Do you want to return to the resurrection point?" The two buttons below, yes or yes. This kind of online game feeling, what happened to the promised Shenxia? And what was with the two yes options below? Was there any meaning to such a choice? Zhu Yao, who was in her soul state, roared. However, the others present did not seem to be able to see her current situation, nor could they see the words on her corpse. The fox demon was already dead, and Wang Shuji was currently hugging her corpse, crazily injecting spiritual energy into her wound in an attempt to heal it. Unfortunately, she was already dead, so what use was there in healing her? The spiritual energy that was released was basically unable to stay on the wound, as it instantly dissipated into the air. It won't happen. Big sis Zhu Yao, nothing will happen to you. Wang Shuji continued to repeat his mechanical actions, as he muttered to himself. He completely had no intention of stopping. It seemed like other than this, he could not think of any other way. However, the body in his hands grew colder. Only when he could no longer release any more spiritual energy, did his emotions begin to collapse. Big sis Zhu Yao, you promised to always protect me. You promised. How can you? This was the first time Zhu Yao saw Wang Shuji cry. No matter if it was the mischievous brat in the past, or the current shy and steady youth, he had never shed a single tear in front of her. Yet now, he was crying like a child. Zhu Yao walked a little closer, and wanted to stroke his head. However, the conversation window that she had ignored earlier began to crazily flood her screen again. As though the system had fallen into an endless loop, more and more identical conversation windows continuously popped out. Not even a moment later, her line of sight was filled with layers of conversation windows. Even if you want to make your presence known, you don't have to do this, hey. What kind of broken system is this? Zhu Yao reflexively wanted to wave her hand to chase after the conversation boxes in front of her, but she heard a ding sound next to her ear. One of the conversation boxes had a yes button dented. Zhu Yao simply felt her heart trembling. Wait, she did not choose. Yes, this was an operational error. Would it be too late to regret? Obviously, it was too late, because in an instant, the screen in front of her cleared. Not only the chat box, but even Wang Shuji and the others had disappeared. Her surroundings were pitch black. There was only a figure running at the bottom of his line of sight. Damn, why is there a channeling bar? Zhu Yao felt that ever since she transmigrated to this world, there were still endless possibilities for her to continuously break through her lower limits. My heart is so tired. The loading bar ran very quickly. In a moment, she saw a white light flash, and a white wall suddenly appeared in front of her. Above the wall was a face that occupied half the sky, looking at her with a benevolent expression. Out of curiosity, she reached out to touch the face, but her hand hit the wall and sank into it. A large amount of liquid instantly poured into her mouth. She choked and wanted to ask what was going on. Instead, it emitted the weak cries of a child. All right, don't cry. This child, it's not like anyone is going to snatch you over, what's the rush? The woman gently wiped the corner of her mouth, and softly coaxed her. Only then did Zhu Yao realize that she had actually turned into an infant. The flesh wall she bumped into earlier was actually the woman's breast. What was in her mouth was. Zhu Yao reflexively spat it out. In an instant, she felt as though she was teasing a woman from a good family. What happened to the resurrection point? Shouldn't her resurrection point be that little mountain village? Right now, she was clearly being reborn. Changing the setting of transmigrating her body into transmigrating her soul, was this really alright? Why aren't you eating anymore? Seeing that she was dodging, the woman stubbornly stuffed her own boob into her mouth. How could Zhu Yao be willing and continued to dodge? Seeing her like this, the woman thought that she had eaten her fill, and only then did she put her clothes back on. After helping baby Zhu Yao tidy up her clothes, she then placed her into the cradle at the side. Zhu Yao curiously inspected her surroundings, and realized that she was still in ancient times. The room had an antique feel to it, but compared to the little mountain village, it was much more luxurious. Because just her cradle alone was extremely exquisite. Servants. The person who seemed to be her mother shouted towards the door, and 4 to 5 maidservants walked in and bowed to her. It seemed like her family was really rich. First, bring the little miss to the courtyard for a walk. I will come over in a moment. The woman instructed. Then, she brought one of the maidservants, and walked into the room inside. It seemed like she was going to change her clothes. Zhu Yao had always been a person with strong adaptability. Facing the current situation, as an infant, she could not resist. She calmly chose to adapt. Although she would often think of her master and Wang Xuji, most probably, they were no longer in the same world. She was currently very well, and was even the daughter of a rich family. Her parents treated her like a treasure, and they would not even let others do things like feeding her milk. Most probably, after she grew up, she could completely do whatever she wanted. Back then, the Xianxia world was filled with killing intent, and if she was not careful, she would be destroyed by some demon or monster. The moment she thought of this, she instantly felt extremely comfortable. She comfortably rolled on the grass. She was going to start a new life. For a moment, she felt that the flowers were fragrant, the grass was green, the clouds were white, and the person flying in the sky was also. The hell, why was there someone flying in the sky? What happened to the promise of leaving the Xianxia world? Wait a minute, that figure seemed to be charging straight towards her. Not even a moment later, he was already standing 5 steps away from her. Dressed in a familiar white robe, although he was shockingly beautiful, he always had an ice-cold face, without the slightest bit of expression. Master. For a moment, she had too many words to retort, but she did not know where to start. Yu Yan looked straight at her. She looked straight at her master as well. The two of them looked at each other. No one spoke. Zhu Yao suddenly felt that there was no meaning in looking at each other like this. Although she did not know why her master would suddenly appear here, looking at his expression, he did not recognize her. She was currently just a baby who was not even a year old. She basically could not speak, let alone explain. You were abandoned. Yu Yan finally spoke. Zhu Yao was startled. What did he mean? You're an orphan. Yu Yan continued to ask. Zhu Yao's expression darkened. Have you ever seen an orphan in your own courtyard? No worries, I will be your family member. What? My mother is currently sitting not far away. I will take you in as my disciple. Yu Yan completely did not have the intention to wait for her reply, and walked towards her. Zhu Yao finally understood what he wanted to do. Kicking her little legs, she planned to crawl away. "Mommy, there's a strange uncle here, and he wants to abduct your daughter." However, how could the little arms and legs of a baby crawl faster than a practitioner who had cultivated for 10,000 years? In the next moment, she was already carried up. A certain master announced with a stern look. "From today onwards, I am your master. Hey, don't make the decision alone. At the very least, ask for my mother's opinion. And since you've agreed as well, then follow me back to Jade Forest Mountain." "What? Who agreed?" "Fall Master, is it really alright for you to brazenly abduct an underage baby girl like this?" Unfortunately, Yu Yan could not hear the roars in her heart. Summoning his flying sword, his figure flashed, bringing along the baby-like Zhu Yao. He instantly disappeared into the horizon. Zhu Yao, who was completely powerless to resist, simply could not hold it in any longer. Raising her leg, she stepped on her master's 10,000-year-old ice block face. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.